for us.
That's right, I'm here in the West End where the farmers have descended upon the London Palladium to protest those measures in the budget, that inheritance tax measure that is hated so much by farming communities. We'll also be hearing from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, later today as well.
And of course, it's not just that in London. We're also going to be up in Darlington, where 150 farmers will rally in a peaceful tractor showcase. Anna Riley is there for us. Tell us more.
That's right, yes, we're here at Darlington Farmers Auction Mart up in the northeast, where farmers are going to be rallying together in 150 tractors like this one. This one reads, "My family feeds yours." And farmers are going to be gathering in solidarity to show the opposition towards inheritance tax.
Fantastic stuff. And in other news, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has announced a £50 million aid package for vulnerable Syrians after the fall of President Assad. But should charity start at home?
And should Prince Andrew uninvite himself from Christmas festivities over his alleged links to a Chinese spy? It comes as Keir Starmer expresses his concern about the challenge posed by the Chinese government. Was this royal taken advantage?
Yes, you may have noticed that we've had a bit of a rebrand this Monday morning. We are no longer Good Afternoon Britain, we are Merry Christmas Britain.
Absolutely. It's feeling very Christmassy. I feel like we're sort of very much running up to that, but it doesn't mean that the news stops, even though we're now having a bit of snow up here on the branding, which is remarkable. And,
things are always changing here. Things are always changing here at GBNews. We never stay still, do we?
No, you've got to move. And also, having just returned from the United States of America,
yes,
where all of the signs say Happy Holidays, and where that has sort of pervaded the sort of element of this time of year, I'm very glad we're making sure it is Merry Christmas rather than happy winter festivities.
Well, that's why we've had so many comments about this. Yeah, I mean, happy holidays, happy festivities, happy festive period.
Oh, it's Christmas.
It's happy winter. Happy winter. May as well just say that. Happy winter.
Or even drop the happy if you're going to be that, pernickety about it all.
There is a debate over whether to use merry or happy. I was always taught that you say happy Christmas, but apparently Merry Christmas. I always thought Merry Christmas was American, but then perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I say both. It depends. I think it depends on the setting. I'm going to do one in formal settings and one in informal settings, perhaps.
But anyway, Tom is back from America. He did dash from Heathrow. Your plane was a little bit late.
I was delayed plane, slight anxiety as to whether we'd make it in here in time, but plenty of time to spare.
He didn't care about my anxiety, whether I was going to have Tom next to me or not. I've missed it. He doesn't appreciate this.
Oh, no. Here's the thing. I didn't want to put you under too much anxiety, so I didn't actually tell you that there was a risk the flight would be delayed.
Classic man. Classic man. Drip feeding you information.
No. It was very calm. Everyone had a great time. And this is Merry Christmas Britain. But it's your show as well, so please do get involved. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But that's all to come after your very latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 5 minutes past midday. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says the government is concerned about the challenge that China poses, following claims a suspected spy formed close ties with senior politicians and royals. The man, identified only as H6, is accused of working for Beijing and reportedly met former prime ministers and became a confidant of Prince Andrew. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is now demanding answers in Parliament, while Reform UK's Nigel Farage has threatened to name H6 under parliamentary privilege unless a court lifts the anonymity order. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has acknowledged the complex relationship with China, but says balancing economic ties is important with safeguarding national security. The Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat, meanwhile, has told us today that he thinks the Labour government are moving too fast to re-establish relations with China.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life. That means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner, he said, in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no cover-up in the Church of England. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed until fresh complaints emerged. Stephen Cottrell said it was impossible to have acted sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement today follows an investigation, and he stressed that Tudor was never protected. Cottrell is set to take on additional duties when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down in January. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company today to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions say they've also secured commitments for a worker voice group and 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share of the company. The firm has, though, faced heavy losses, public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. But Kretinsky plans major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as he's alive. A 25-year-old OnlyFans model has been handed a 13-week prison sentence, suspended for 12 months, for throwing a milkshake at Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Victoria Thomas-Bowen admitted assaulting Mr Farage outside a Clacton pub during the general election, covering him with yellow liquid and damaging a security guard's jacket. Mr Farage, now MP for Clacton, said the attack left him saddened but unhurt, as he was simply doing his job. Labour is planning the biggest shake-up of local government in England since the 1970s today. A paper out later will outline plans to abolish district councils, introduce more elected mayors and merge smaller councils into larger authorities. The government says it will streamline services and give mayors new powers over planning to deliver housing and infrastructure. But district councils are warning the changes could cause turmoil and undermine local decision-making. Later this afternoon, we're expecting to hear from the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, and she will call devolution the default position for the Labour government. A convicted terrorist is reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was deeply offended by its sign. It's reported that 60-year-old Khalid Bakr claims the depiction of a bearded Arab incites violence, despite him previously being jailed for preparing jihadi propaganda. He also claims it's racist and wants more than £1,800 from the pub's landlord, and plans to take on 30 more pubs with the same name if successful. But the owner, Robbie Hayes, has called it a complete joke, adding that the pub has been called the Saracen's Head for 500 years. And close to 1,000 people are feared dead after Cyclone Chido tore through Mayotte in the Indian Ocean, making it the strongest storm to hit the region in over 90 years. Winds of up to 125 miles an hour ripped apart homes, leaving entire neighbourhoods in ruins, and caused severe damage to Mayotte's main hospital and airport. 1,600 emergency personnel and supplies have been rushed to the territory, which is home to more than 300,000 people. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain, or indeed Merry Christmas, Britain, as we're calling the show between now and the 25th. Farmers have organised a major event in London this afternoon as part of the industry's next step in its attempts to reverse the so-called family farm tax.
Yes, so the event is being hosted at the London Palladium, which is owned by Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, no less, who himself joined last month's mass demonstration.
Well, farmers are certainly not backing down yet. Our very own reporter Adam Cherry joins us now from London Palladium. Adam, what's going on today?
Well, we've just gone in, the doors have just opened, and over the next 3 hours we're going to hear from farming leaders, the community. At about 2:30 we're going to hear from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. She's expected to say that no one is safe from Labour's tax rises. Of course, it's that inheritance tax change that has the farming community so furious, and we've seen just in the last week protests along Downing Street and Whitehall, the tractors. Don't think there's enough room for tractors in here today, but nonetheless, the spirits are still high. It's the same group, Saving Family Farming, which organised the event in November in Whitehall, of course, when the likes of Jeremy Clarkson and so on were all across Whitehall and across Parliament Square. Some of those people are here today. And as I said, about 2:30, that's when we'll hear the leader of the opposition, and we'll be bringing that to you live during your show, guys.
You a little bit later on. Thank you very much indeed, Adam, at the London Palladium. It's not only the only gathering taking place today. Up in Darlington, 150 tractors are rallying in a peaceful showcase highlighting the impact of the budget on family farms. We're joined now by reporter Anna Riley. Anna, so what's going on in Darlington today then?
Good afternoon to you both. Well, you can see the actions already happening. You can see that tractors here have started gathering. We're expecting 150 tractors here. It's a peaceful rally throughout Darlington, just to show the strength of feeling within the farming community about inheritance tax. You can see as well that many of these tractors have been decorated for Christmas. Many of them have different signs as well. And they're expected to be leaving at about 1:30 this afternoon. I'm joined now by Will Raw. He's a farmer. Will, thank you for joining us. You've been part of organising this event. You're going to be speaking a little bit later this afternoon. Just tell us what it's all about.
It's about highlighting the issues family farms are having at the moment. We very much feel that we are not getting heard, more nationally, so we're bringing the countryside to the rural areas to make our voices heard.
What sort of farming do you do, and how will the implications of the budget affect you? So
we are a mixed arable and poultry farm, and the budget will affect us greatly. So I farm with my dad and uncle, and obviously we don't qualify for the £3 million threshold because there's three of us. So we've already started to look at ways of saving money to be able to pay the tax, but that unfortunately means we won't be reinvesting in the farm.
Do you feel listened to?
No, not really. I mean, I think you'll see with a number of tractors we're expected today that the rural community really doesn't feel listened to.
And as part of this as well, you've been giving out presents this morning just to show that the impact that farmers have, not just on giving us food, but the wider impact that they have on communities like this one in Darlington. Yeah,
absolutely. We went to Darlington Memorial this morning and we delivered toys to the children's ward. We've also raised over £2,500, and that's going to be going to both the children's wards and local good causes. We really want the community to support what we're doing, and we're trying our best. We don't want to be doing this, but like I said, we just don't feel like we're getting heard.
And you'll certainly be making your mark. We can see how huge some of these tractors are. A convoy of 150 going through Darlington. What message do you want to get across from this rally?
I just want the government to listen and realise that as a rural community, we're really hurting. This is, it's our, it goes right to our very being. We love what we do. We love being able to feed the nation, and unfortunately the family inheritance tax means that we're not going to be able to do that. We just want to be able to carry on giving the British public, affordable, safe British food.
How are you feeling going into Christmas? I mean, farming is an uncertain business to be in anyway, isn't it? But how does it feel going into this Christmas especially?
It's hard, we've had some really serious conversations. It's it's difficult, but farmers are resilient. We do find a way, but it's definitely tough.
And what will you be saying this afternoon? What's the message you're getting across in your speech?
I'm just going to try and explain to the government and the wider audience, what it is to be a farmer. We don't make vast amounts of money. You won't see a farmer on the 100 rich list. What we can do is give something to our children. We work, we miss a lot of birthdays, we work Christmas Day. We're perhaps not the best parents and husbands we can be, but at the end of the day, if we can leave something valuable or a business to our children, it makes that sacrifice worthwhile.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you for sharing with us. So we'll be here throughout this afternoon for when this rally's starting. We'll be listening to the speeches and getting across the message that the farmers have here after that budget and how they're feeling coming up to Christmas.
Great stuff. Well, Anna Riley, of course, will be back with you throughout the programme, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, in other news, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has announced a £50 million aid package for Syrians after the fall of President Assad's regime.
Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy says diplomatic talks are open with the Syrian rebels who toppled Assad's regime.
HTS remains a prescribed organisation, but we can have diplomatic contact, and so we do have diplomatic contact.
OK, but the question is whether we should be spending more on humanitarian aid in Syria, or could the money be better spent here at home?
Well, delighted to be joined by the former Conservative Member of Parliament, Alistair Burt. Alistair, what do you think the government is trying to get at here with this aid? Is this diplomacy, or is this actually trying to help out desperate people? I mean, there's an argument that they're trying to sort of win over HTS.
Well, there's a series of things behind it. Firstly, Syria is in a mess. It's a state that's had 13 years of civil war. Cities are destroyed. People have been moved from place to place, and people are quite desperate. There's barely an economy, and people are in desperate need. So there's a humanitarian aspect to the support being given. Secondly, everybody wants to see Syria thrive, and that means having a system of government which the Syrians will choose, but which is different to what they've had, and of course different to what we've seen in the region when there's been a collapse of a tyrant and authoritarian government. Now that needs support, that needs international support. We're not the only country offering assistance in a whole variety of ways. So it's not a question simply of trying to win over HTS. We will find out what sort of regime they are in due course. But trying to provide support as it gets going is probably the best way to ensure that it provides the reasonable and plural government that Syrians quite obviously want to see.
I mean, is it going to make a difference when it comes to that? I mean, a lot of people are getting in touch saying, you know what, we've got pensioners who are going to be struggling to put the heating on in this country. We've got homelessness on the rise, sadly. We've got the use of food banks that has increased over recent years. We've got huge amounts of people unemployed, not working, or on welfare, etc., etc. There's quite a lot to be spent in this country, and some people are saying, well, hang on, is this 50 million to Syria? Is that just the beginning? Who exactly is that going to be going towards? Can we trust all the NGOs and the various charities to make sure that it doesn't get into Islamist, potentially terrorist hands? These are questions that people are asking.
Yeah, well, it's always difficult for government to make choices in terms of its spending, and we know that. But this is £50 million being given to Syria. Next year we're going to spend £192 billion on the NHS. We're going to spend we spent this year £319 billion on welfare. You know, we spend money in this country on things that we need on a scale completely different to that of offering £50 million to those in need in Syria.
I suppose on that point then, Alistair, if it's a small amount of money, and I suppose in these international contexts it is actually a relatively small amount of money, is it actually going to do anything?
£50 million is a lot of money to most people, Tom, and it's joined with other
Alistair, you were just explaining how little amount of money it is.
No, Tom, it's little in comparison to the billions of pounds we spend on people in the UK. Your point was that we want and need to spend money on people in the UK, which of course we do. I've just pointed out it's on a completely different scale, but it doesn't mean that £50 million isn't much money.
Yeah, but when you've got pensioners getting in touch who are fearful that they're not going to be able to put the heating on, who are actually living without the heating on at the moment because they've had their welfare benefit taken away on the winter fuel allowance. We're told all the time that our public services are crumbling and struggling. The NHS doesn't have enough money, even though it does, as you say, have so many billions going in. I mean, a lot of people just don't think that that is the priority of the UK government and don't trust that the money is going to actually do what our ministers say it will do.
Well, two things. Firstly, as I say, there's a lot of money spent by government on many things, and overseas support and support to Syria at the moment is a very, very small proportion of what the government spends on other things. Your viewers and listeners are right to be concerned about the needs in the UK, and of course they're right to express them, from farmers through to pensioners and others. I'm not making a case against that. But in terms of Syria's needs at the moment and the needs of other states, two things are important. Firstly, if Syria's government can provide for its people with support from the international community, it means bad actors will not do so. Because in many states where the governments can't provide, others get involved, and they usually demand a price from the people, and that's not good news for them.
But could we be giving money? Could we be giving money to Islamists who have just released potentially hundreds or even thousands of potential terrorists who may be out to get the West? We know that there could be British jihadists, for example, who have been released, who could be making their way back to the UK as we speak. Well, we don't know. I think it's, can we follow the money adequately is what I'm asking.
Yeah, there's a lot of work put into tracing and making sure that money is passed over in the right way, and ministers are often asked to confirm that routes are safe. But your point about people leaving Syria and coming in our direction is a good one. If things aren't good in Syria, more people are going to leave. Remember, millions have already left Syria. 3.5 million are in Turkey. A quarter of Lebanon's population are refugees. And of course, if they're provided for in Syria, there is less likelihood of them being on the move. So that's another good reason why we should be involved.
Yeah, I suppose there is an argument that this is very small fry in terms of all of the numbers that we're talking about. I mean, £50 million as a one-off. I mean, that's less than we spend on hotels for illegal migrants in one single day.
Yes, but we've spent some £4 billion on Syrian support since 2013.
Well, Alistair Burt, it's been fantastic to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. You are, of course, a former Conservative MP and an expert in this area. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Yeah, I think there is an argument there that if you want to stop another wave of refugees...
I don't think that would make any difference at all.
You need to make sure people aren't too hungry.
I'm not sure the £50 million is going to make a big difference at all, but it could have made a difference when it came to, I don't know, pensioners' winter fuel payments. I don't know, let us know your thoughts. Perhaps you do think that it's sensible for us to be spending. People will be living in dire situations, although many people, of course, very happy indeed that Assad has been toppled.
Yes, so. But as Alistair was saying, we sort of need to wait and see with regard to this new reformed HTS group led by a former Al-Qaeda member who now seems to be saying that there's not going to be a war with Israel or a ban on women showing their hair. So we need to sort of wait and see. There's sort of two paths that this guy now in charge of Syria can take. Apparently he's been reading Western books in terms of how to deliver a free market economy. But, I mean, he could also very easily go completely the other way. One to watch.
I mean, Mary said something similar. She says, why don't we wait and see if Syria can cope rather than send them British taxpayers' money first? I guess it depends. Is the money going specifically to humanitarian purposes or, as Tom suggested, is it being used for diplomatic reasons? Should we be talking and communicating and potentially negotiating with Islamist terrorists, perhaps terrorist groups?
Perhaps groups that formerly were terrorists and now are saying they're something else but technically are still on our terror watch lists. Yep,
still prescribed. Still prescribed. There's another debate there, whether they should be unprescribed. Everyone just says, too early to tell. Too early to tell.
But some breaking news now. A hearing over the anonymity of an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice at 2 p.m. this afternoon. So that's just to repeat, a hearing over the anonymity of an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York. That's going to take place at the Royal Courts of Justice at 2 p.m. this afternoon. We'll bring you that verdict live here on this programme.
Right, so could we find out then who this H6 is?
We could indeed.
Right, OK, and what does this mean for Prince Andrew and his reputation? We are going to be discussing a little bit later on in the show whether he should uninvite himself from all of these royal Christmas duties, whether he should make that walk from Sandringham, whether he should be at the various services.
Being rehabilitated in some way, as he seems to have been slowly, perhaps. by some senior members of the family.
Well, that's next. Stick with us.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mail, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and for the next nearly 400 years had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 28 minutes past midday. We'll get this is the first day. We'll get there. But as we reported just a few moments ago, hearing over the anonymity of an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York, that will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Yes, very interesting development in this story. Now, the alleged spy currently is known only as H6, so we don't have an idea of who actually this man is. But he's been described as having an unusual degree of trust with Prince Andrew and is also reported to have met with former Prime Ministers Lord David Cameron and Baroness Theresa May. OK.
Well, Prince Andrew is now reportedly being told to lie low this Christmas and keep away from festive celebrations with the rest of his family. Should he go a step further and uninvite himself altogether?
Well, should he? The decent thing to do?
Here's the thing.
It's not the first scandal, is it?
It's not the first scandal. And every Christmas since those Epstein scandals, it's always been remarked that Prince Andrew is there, he's walking with the family, it's pictures, it leads news bulletins, and perhaps the royal family decides that family comes first, they don't mind how they look, especially at Christmas. But it is a talking point in the media every year that, my goodness me, is he being rehabilitated?
Yeah, I could understand when the late Queen was alive. that it meant a lot for Prince Andrew to be there on the scene. But perhaps not so much now. I don't know. But anyway, he's due to attend the annual Christmas lunch at Buckingham Palace. Then he's also going to be, as you say, pictured at this traditional walk from Sandringham to St Magdalene's Church. OK, so these are massive photo opportunities, aren't
Huge.
they? We follow them live.
And we see them every year, and the same conversations are had every year. I mean, perhaps in a funny sort of way, this H6 Chinese spy situation could be quite a useful way for the royal family to avoid greater accusations of scandal or being out of touch or having a lack of judgment, which I think is perhaps the common thread throughout the stories that we've been talking about around this area.
But I mean, if I was Prince Andrew, and obviously that's hard to imagine, but if I were Prince Andrew, I probably would say, you know what, I'm just going to sit this one out so that my father doesn't have to make this decision. So that he doesn't have to make this decision publicly and ban me. I'm just going to, do something else. There's also reports that maybe he wants to escape to the Gulf, so maybe he could do that. It's always nice at Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas in the sunshine, why ever not? But I do think that Prince Andrew has shown a remarkable lack of judgment over who he associates with over the course of not just recent years, but decades. So I wonder if, given everything we know about Prince Andrew's judgment, will he make a call at all with regard to whether or not to do that walk from Sandringham?
And just a reminder, we are expecting a hearing now over the anonymity of this alleged Chinese spy. That's going to take place at the Royal Courts of Justice at 2 o'clock today. So it's all happening on this show.
It absolutely is. We'll bring you the outcome of that and perhaps some details over who this spy is or was. That is, if the court says we're allowed to.
Yes, well, this is Merry Christmas, Britain, on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, Angela Rayner is going to promise to make devolution the default setting for councils across the country. Is this the right move? Do you want your council to have more power?
And crucially, might you miss out on local elections this coming May the 1st, if indeed district councils are abolished? Might you not be voting at all?
Suspicious. After your headlines with Sam.
12:32, the top story from the newsroom this afternoon. Well, as we were just hearing from Tom and Emily, there will now be a hearing over the anonymity of an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York. That will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice in around an hour and a half time. The suspect, known only as H6, is said to have become close to the Duke and was pictured with senior politicians, raising concerns over China's influence in the UK. Earlier, Sir Keir Starmer admitted the challenge that China does pose, saying it's a growing concern, but defended his government's approach to engaging with Beijing, including a meeting with President Xi Jinping in November. Meanwhile, MPs, including Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, the former Tory leader, is warning that this case is just the tip of the iceberg, he says, with China's influence seen as a significant threat. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed until fresh complaints emerged. Stephen Cottrell said it was impossible to act any sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. Well, his statement follows an investigation, and he stressed that Tudor was never protected by the Church of England. Cottrell is set to take on additional duties when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down in January. The government has approved a £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions say they've also secured commitments for a 10% share of dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced heavy losses, though, with public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. However, Kretinsky plans for major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as he's alive. Labour is planning the biggest shake-up of local government in England since the 1970s. A paper out today will outline plans to abolish district councils, to introduce more elected mayors and merge smaller councils into larger authorities. The government says it will streamline services and give mayors new powers over planning to deliver housing and infrastructure. But district councils are warning the changes could cause turmoil and undermine local decision-making. Later today, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner will call the devolution plans the default position for government. And breaking news in the last half hour or so from Oxford Crown Court. Grammy-nominated rapper Slowthai has been cleared of raping 2 women following a house party after a gig in 2021. The 29-year-old, whose real name is Tyrone Frampton, and his co-accused Alex Blake Walker were both acquitted today of 3 joint charges of rape at Oxford Crown Court. Blake Walker was also cleared of an additional charge of sexual assault. The jury returned those verdicts after more than 10 hours of deliberation, following a 2-week trial where the defendants denied the allegations, claiming the sexual activity was consensual. Well, both men have walked free from court, with Frampton's wife among those crying with relief as the verdicts were read out this afternoon. Those are the latest headlines for now. Plenty more still to come with Tom and Emily. I'll be back with you in around half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, here's your Met Office weather forecast for GB News. For most of us, through the rest of today, it's actually looking largely dry, and there will even be a bit of sunshine around. But across northern Scotland, it's a much wetter story. That's because there is a front lingering here, and it is going to bring some persistent and at times heavy rain, which is why we're going to see some rainfall totals building up. There could be a bit of disruption, particularly on the roads, even a little bit of flooding in some places. A slightly drier, brighter story across the Northern Isles, but a few showers pushing their way in here. And like I said, across much of the country, it is looking mostly dry with some sunshine pushing through at times. Temperatures are a little bit above average for the time of year, most places getting into double figures, but there will be some strong winds across northern parts, making it feel colder than this. As we go through into this evening, it is staying wet across many parts of northern Scotland. Could be some travel disruption, so do take care if you're heading onto the roads. Otherwise, across other parts of Scotland, some showery bursts, a few showery bursts across parts of Northern Ireland too, but generally a drier story to end the day across much of the rest of the country, and there will be some clear skies around as well. As we go overnight, we are going to stick with that drier theme for many places. A few outbreaks of rain here and there, but it's mainly across northern Scotland where it's looking pretty wet. Otherwise, there will be some clear skies around. I'm not expecting much fog to develop because of the winds picking up a little bit, but there could be some low cloud pushing in across some higher ground across the north, so some hill fog is possible in some parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount because of those winds picking up, so not an especially chilly start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, though, turning cloudier with cloud pushing in from the west, and it is going to turn a bit wetter, a bit windier. The rain initially across northern and western parts, it's not really going to reach to the southeast until later on in the day. Temperatures, well, they look similar to today, really. Still a little bit above average for the time of year, but like I say, those winds picking up. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A832 is closed each way over Moy Bridge in Marybank because of flooding. In Tyne and Wear, the A167 is closed in both directions over the Gateshead flyover for safety checks. The road underneath the flyover is also closed. The Port of Holyhead remains closed for emergency repairs to damage caused by Storm Dara. The M42 in Warwickshire, there are long southbound delays after a vehicle overturned earlier at junction 9 at Curdworth. All lanes are back open, but there are still queues taking an hour back beyond junction 10 at Tamworth. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 3 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound, where someone's broken down between junctions 5 and 6 from Droitwich to Worcester, causing queues. And the M1 in Northamptonshire is closed northbound between junctions 16 and 18 from Northampton to Rugby after a lorry caught fire, with queues almost back to junction 15.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, Merry Christmas, Britain. Let's return to that Chinese espionage row. Prince Andrew is reportedly being told to lie low a bit this Christmas and keep away from the royal festive celebrations.
So we're asking, should he go a step further and actually uninvite himself from this Christmas altogether? Would that be perhaps the best thing for the whole family? Well, joining us now is Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday. Charlotte, why is it that Prince Andrew just continually sticks his foot in it?
I think it's, to be honest, I think it's his personality, which is quite a hard thing to change, which is sort of why uninviting himself is the only thing he can do, because every time he's out in public, he makes these gaffes, he sounds boorish, and in his, behind the scenes, he makes these terrible decisions because in his own mind, he thinks he's basically the greatest thing since sliced bread. He was then given this powerful role of trade envoy, which only perpetuated this feeling that he was, may as well be the king, he was so important. And that's why he gets himself in the soup so often, because he just, he doesn't have much in the way, I'm afraid, of self-awareness.
Yeah, Charlotte, I should remind our viewers and listeners that we have just heard that there will be a hearing over the anonymity of this alleged Chinese spy. That's going to be at 2 o'clock, so we'll bring that to our viewers and listeners too when it comes. But uninviting himself from the royal festivities over Christmas, I mean, is that something that someone like Prince Andrew would do? Or would he have to wait for King Charles to say, you know what, just don't come?
I think under any normal circumstances, he wouldn't miss this opportunity for the world. I mean, he does very, very little now. He lives for these moments. He really does, where he can be seen and he can stride in front of the other members of the royal family like he did at the King of Greece's funeral. And he does love them. So I don't think he will, but I really think he should do the decent thing, because it puts his brother in such a difficult position. Because how churlish not to invite your own brother, in some ways, to the Christmas party. But then what other choice does Charles have? If only Andrew could see sense and relieve his brother of this kind of burden of having to embarrassingly cancel his appearance at the Christmas get-together. The only hope, I think, for Charles is that Fergie might help her ex-husband see sense.
And are they still on good terms? I suppose they have children together. Is that really a genuine conduit for that sort of conversation?
Definitely, because Fergie still lives with Andrew, don't forget. And she was in the Sunday Times in the weekend saying how, well, alluding to Andrew being a sad man, actually, which was kind of quite touching. And she sees it as her duty to look after him. And in that same interview, she spoke about something we already know, which is that the king loves Fergie, actually really is quite fond of her. And she's grown very close to Camilla over the years. So a great kind of mediator in this whole scenario could be Fergie and could help her husband see sense. And I think he listens to her and very few other people by the sounds of things.
Charlotte, is there any way in which we're being a bit harsh on Prince Andrew here? We're hearing that this alleged Chinese spy had meetings with the likes of David Cameron, the likes of Theresa May too. I'm sure many others. This alleged spy clearly had links with a lot of people. He was able to get in there. So are we being a bit harsh on Prince Andrew? Was he just one of many?
I think if Andrew was defending himself, he'd say, hold on a minute, this guy had pictures of David Cameron on his desk and Theresa May. And so, in the context of him being the trade envoy as well, he very much sees his role as mixing with these kind of people. So I suppose if Andrew's defending himself, that's what he'd say. But there is an element of common sense. And there is that letter to Dominic Hampshire, isn't there, where he says, we know how to sneak people in and out of Royal Lodge. That, by the way, I think will be the death knell for Andrew's position at Royal Lodge, because he actually has used Royal Lodge as a way to, for want of a better word, misbehave, which is just highly, highly embarrassing and a really good reason for Charles to finally get Andrew out of Royal Lodge, which he's been desperate to do and unable to do so far.
This is the fascinating distinction, perhaps, for a lot of people. We all know that the late Queen had a huge soft spot for what media, and I'm sure many people would say, was her favourite son. But Charles likely doesn't have that same level of devotion and affection that the late Queen did. Or does he? Will this be a perhaps more clinical king who can perhaps see more clearly on the issues and transgressions of his brother than Prince Andrew's mother could?
I think so. I mean, the two brothers haven't seen eye to eye historically over the years, but he did say, you know, Charles is quite a soft man at heart, and he has said that they have a bond of blood. And I think that's what's made it so difficult so far to remove him from Royal Lodge and indeed the family, because Charles does have a heart, you know, and is his brother, but they're just not two peas in a pod. They're not the same character at all. They're very, very different people. And so when these things kind of happen, it helps Charles, I think, to make hard decisions, because it gives him some facts to point to, whereas blood and love, you know, are less sort of easy to put your finger on. But this can help him say, look, here is the evidence sheet, Andrew. Your position is untenable. What can I do? You've forced me into this position.
Yes, there might be quite a lot of passive aggression at that Christmas lunch table if it does go ahead with Prince Andrew. This is something to talk about, maybe. Charlotte Griffiths, thank you very much indeed. You're the editor-at-large on the Mail and Sunday. Fantastic to have you on. I'm sure lots of you have got your opinions on whether Prince Andrew should just stay out of the royal public life.
This story just does sort of open the window to Prince Andrew's personality. Anyone with money, power, influence, fame, and Prince Andrew just rushed to them and stuck by them, even when no one else would. Yes, do you think it's because they massaged his ego? I'm sure there's some of that going on, but I think we should
is a good word.
We should probably leave it with regard to the massages that that Prince Andrew may or may not have received. This is Merry Christmas, Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come.
Yes, our political editor has been speaking to the Prime Minister's official spokesperson. I believe he'll have a line or two on the potential for local elections to not take place.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Small mouthful of David Walliams now and what he's revealing, what he's talking about. Josh, where do you think this goes? Because there is a lot of speculation about David, who he is, what he is. Where do you think this takes us now?
Oh, I think he's an absolute sweetheart. I mean, it was such a joy to spend as much time with him as I did. And the where it takes us is simply that I think we're growing out of, I suppose, the fairly infantile idea that we might have had about gender and sexuality, especially over the past sort of 5 to 10 to 15 years, where the culture wars have gotten so hot that it's become very, very difficult to talk about any of these issues sensibly without feeling like you're going to get pilloried or attacked from either side. And so Uncomfortable Conversations is a show where we try to have those conversations sort of heedless of treading on eggshells or triggering...
And do you think, Josh, that these conversations will become less uncomfortable when you get people like Walliams talking about it and who he is and where he's going, and therefore more acceptable for other people to open up and say, I don't know who I am or what I am, but I know I'm different?
That would be my hope. Look, I'm married to a guy, so I have sort of bona fides on the gay card, and I always felt that it was somewhat of a caricature the way the gay community or lobby, so to speak, insisted on a certain way of talking, a certain way of dressing, a certain way of voting, a certain way of dancing, that you can only be a good gay if you're wearing arseless chaps and straddling a giant inflatable penis while you're going down Oxford Street during Gay Pride. You know, like, I always thought, can't we have a very big tent? And I think what David is doing here is being honest, being upfront, saying it doesn't mean I have to join a team, it doesn't mean I'm any different from the person you knew.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, Merry Christmas, Britain. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch about our conversation just there about Prince Andrew. Some of you appear to have a little bit of sympathy for the man. Dorcas says, who has the right to say that someone can't go to church on Christmas Day or meet with his family for a Christmas meal? I'm sure the media has the wherewithal to Photoshop him out of the photos if they object so much.
But it's not about who has the right. Of course, he has the right to go to dinner, to go to lunch with his family, to go to church with his family. Of course, he has that right. The question is it the best look? And at what point does sort of the royal family think about not just its traditions, but how it is perceived? It reminds me of when the Queen wouldn't come back to London when Princess Diana had her car crash, because that was proper protocol. Of course she wouldn't. But that's not how people felt, so she changed her mind.
Yeah, but Susan says Andrew has every right to celebrate Christmas with his family. So there you go. Two against one there.
No, but he has... Okay, everyone can agree he has the right to attend Christmas.
But it's the look.
It's about the judgment. Yeah. Should he? I have the right to do lots of things. Not all of them I tend to take.
I think that's fair. I've been persuaded there. Christopher Hope, our political editor, is fresh out of a briefing with the Prime Minister's official spokesperson. Christopher, what have you found out for us?
Yeah, afternoon both. Welcome back to the GB News' studio here in Westminster. The government has confirmed that there could be some council elections that could be delayed by a year because of this shake-up we've seen from Angela Rayner. But the ministers are saying very clearly they want to see a clear commitment to progressing this reorganisation, and that's why they think they'll allow may allow some councils to delay their elections till the following year. Whether local people want that is a different matter altogether. Certainly on my Twitter feed today, since this idea emerged earlier, there are people who are quite cross about this. The idea of democracy delayed is democracy denied. So the government says it will not allow any council to delay having an election in May, but some might be allowed to do so. There's also been chatter in the briefing with the PM spokesman just now about the so-called surrender squad of civil servants working in the Cabinet Office with Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's a Cabinet Office minister. They deny it's called a surrender squad. That means about the idea of trading away a lot of the advantages we have from Brexit as part of this renegotiation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. They say there's fewer than 100 civil servants now working in the Cabinet Office. On the issue of fishing waters, a big concern for GB News viewers and listeners. They say there's no running commentary, but the government will always protect the interests of our fishers, as they call them, and the marine environment. And just finally on the issue of the so-called Chinese spy,
Sorry, we're just remarking, Chris, on the gender-neutral language that's been inserted.
Fisher people. No, anyway, sorry, Chris. Please go on.
Yeah, you could say fisher people. Fishermen in the old language, but fishers in the 21st century, Emily and Tom, according to the government at least. The issue of naming the alleged Chinese spy all over the front pages, the government says it's a live case and everybody should do all they can not to undermine that case. And the UK's engagement with China will be in the national interest, putting the UK's interests first. For example, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is due to go to China in about 4 weeks' time. No comment on if that trip will be called off. It sounds like it won't be, frankly. The government's putting that first. So a busy time in the meeting today with the PM spokesman.
No, absolutely fascinating there about the sort of cozying up to China despite all of the news over these Chinese spies. But I do have to ask you on this democracy point, this was the government officially conceding today, perhaps for the first time, that some councils will be able to request that they don't get elected this year, that they stay in office for an extra year. I mean, I put it to you, Chris, that there'll be some councillors thinking, yippee, look at where my party is in the polls right now. We can just avoid having an election now at all. People won't be able to vent.
Would that be Labour councillors, Tom?
I think that they're looking at how far the party has fallen in the polls in the last 6 months. Is there not a concern here that Labour-run councils will say, no, just don't need to be elected this year?
That is certainly the actual question I put to the PM spokesman, that you'll have some failing councils who will be quite relieved not to have to put themselves in front of the electorate in May. Now, Number 10 say very clearly, in order to delay any election, and it shouldn't happen in a lot of cases, or they wouldn't tell us how many instances might be delayed, but they said you've got to show real a commitment to go through this reorganisation process where they can get rid of kind of the district councillor band, replacing them with much bigger county council areas. So they did say clearly this won't be allowed easily. And certainly going back through history, elections are delayed only for big reasons like COVID, of course, famously most recently. Before that, the foot-and-mouth disease, that delayed the election by 1 month, for example. So delaying elections is a big deal, and we're told here it will be the exception. But we'll be interested to see how many elections are allowed to be delayed. And to your point, Emily, I would say yes, some Labour councillors might be relieved, but so might some Tory councillors. The party which will be cross about it is probably the challenger ones, notably Reform UK, which is putting a lot of effort into winning these seats. They're going to stand in loads of different seats in the May local elections. If they can't do that in some seats, someone like Nigel Farage, the leader, might be quite cross.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw Harriet Harman on one of the flagship political shows, I think, on the BBC, saying that Reform are a threat to democracy. Doesn't look good making that accusation at the same time as you've got the Labour Party potentially delaying our democratic right to vote, at least on the local level, even if it is technically legitimate to do so in one way or another. Curious.
Very much so. Chris Hope, thanks so much for joining us live there from Westminster with that breaking news. I mean, my goodness me, the government is actually, I mean, as Chris was saying there, the last time we did this was COVID. We've done it in wartime. It doesn't feel like we're in that level of crisis to need to do this.
We need to talk about this more, I think, throughout the show, because I think it's a big story, a very big story. Is democracy delayed, democracy denied? That is a great question that Christopher put there. We've got lots more coming up on today's show as well. Checks in the Mail. We're talking about the takeover of the Royal Mail by a Czech billionaire, Daniel Kretinsky. Is that the right move, or are we losing something? Are we losing another piece of our British heritage, Tom?
And that is a question that many people will be asking, but, I mean, hasn't the ship sailed? This is a private organisation. Why should the government be wading in terms of who it wants to sell itself to?
Dates back to Henry VIII. Let us know what you make of this. We're going to be coming back to this topic very shortly indeed, after your weather.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Locals in Abingdon in Oxfordshire have signed a petition to keep the name of their local pub, and it's called The Midget. Now, this comes after a university lecturer led an 11-month campaign to change the name of the pub, and the owners, Green King, have caved in. But locals are fighting back, and GB News spoke to one resident, Leanne Thompson, for her thoughts earlier today.
I'm not feeling great about it, to be honest. You know, it's a pub that's been here for a very long time. It's called The Midget after a MG car, and they're changing it to the Roaring Raindrop, which a lot of people are not happy about. We know why they're changing it, but a lady apparently came in who was very upset at the offensive term for the name midget. But nobody here sees it as an offensive term. You don't see the midget and feel any kind of offence towards that. It's named after a car. If she was to actually come, she might actually know more about it, but apparently she's not even been into the pub. She's just heard about it and broadcasted on social media that she wanted the name changed because it's offensive, which as locals don't feel that way. It's the midget. It will always be the midget. And if you look, it's even still on Midget Close. So I don't know if they're going to change it to the Roaring Raindrop Close.
Do you know, you should walk into the midget now and go, do you serve shorts? And just keep going on the joke. It's named after a car, the MG Midget, that was manufactured in the town of Abingdon for a while. The car was released in 1961. The Boozer was built in 1974, giving huge pride to the area. It wasn't named after midgets, you know, the Snow White and the 7 vertically challenged individuals variety. It's named after a car.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 16th of December, and this is Merry Christmas, Britain.
Yes, the Christmas rebrand. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
One afternoon at the Palladium. Farmers gather in a theatrical show of unity against Labour's contentious tax raid. Andrew Lloyd Webber's venue will play host to a major event as workers demand a reversal.
And the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, he's announced a £50 million aid package for Syrians after the fall of President Assad. But should charity not start at home?
And should Prince Andrew uninvite himself from Christmas festivities over his alleged links to a Chinese spy? It all comes as Keir Starmer expresses his concern about the challenge posed by the Chinese government. Was the royal taken advantage of? This is all threading together into a bit of a curiosity in terms of the British government's position on China, the British government's position on democracy, the British government's position on security.
OK, go on. How is it weaving together?
Well, you have the Chancellor about to visit Beijing.
Yeah.
Chinese spies operating freely at the upper echelons of the British establishment.
Well, until they get barred from the UK.
Until they get barred from
Allegedly.
the UK, but only after, you know, cozying it up to prime ministers and royals and you name it. And now we might be delaying elections.
Are we a bit of a clown country at this point? I mean, we've got Merry Christmas Britain behind us, but all of these things together. I am concerned about these local...
You've got to have a Merry Christmas, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
It's a bad look, this local election stuff. If you're justifying it because you're reorganising things, you're having a bit more devolution, you're changing the way the councils are, OK. But delaying when you're very much down in the polls, when Keir Starmer his personal ratings are absolutely on the floor, worst favourability of any modern Prime Minister, apparently, according to the new Ipsos poll.
Yeah.
Is this the time to be seen to be delaying elections?
This is the thing, and I suppose the other question that would be asked, and this is a legitimate question to ask, if Labour were still 20 points ahead in the polls, would they be talking about delaying these local elections in many areas? It's an open question.
It's an open question, but we'd like you to answer it for us. gbnews.com/your say. Please do get in touch. But it's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just coming up to, in fact, just turned 3 minutes past 1. The top story this afternoon. Downing Street is refusing to comment on whether the Prime Minister or any other ministers met with an alleged Chinese spy. The Prime Minister's official spokesman also refused to confirm if Sir Keir Starmer would support attempts to name the spy in the Commons, stressing that ministers engage with China in line, they say, with UK interests. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has voiced concern over China's actions following claims that the spy formed close ties with senior political figures and royals, including Prince Andrew. Pressure is now mounting, though, in Parliament, with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith calling for answers and Reform's Nigel Farage threatening to name the suspect under parliamentary privilege. We're expecting a hearing over the anonymity of the alleged Chinese spy taking place at the Royal Courts of Justice in around an hour's time. Well, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat told us earlier this morning that he thinks the Labour government are moving too fast to re-establish relations with China.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life. That means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no Church of England cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed until fresh complaints emerged. Mr Cottrell said it was impossible to have acted sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement today follows an investigation, and he stressed that Tudor was never protected. Well, Cottrell is set to take on additional duties when Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down in January. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky today. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions also say they have secured commitments for a worker voice group and 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced, though, heavy losses with public complaints and a £10 million fine for missing delivery targets. However, Kretinsky says he plans major investment, saying he will support Royal Mail for as long as he's alive. Nigel Farage has condemned the suspended sentence given to a woman who threw a milkshake at him during the general election campaign, calling the ruling an example of two-tier justice. OnlyFans model Victoria Thomas Bowen was sentenced to 13 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months after pleading guilty to the assault. That attack occurred outside a pub in Clacton in June as Farage campaigned for MP. The Reform UK leader took to social media today saying, "We now live in a country where you can assault a member of parliament and not go to prison," he said. Well, a redesign of local governments is sparking fears that powers will be taken away from local communities. The government's devolution plans, the biggest shake-up since 1970, proposes merging councils into larger authorities to cut costs and streamline services. Labour's defending the move, though, claiming it could save £2 billion, which would be invested in frontline services. But critics, including the District Councils network, are warning that the proposals could create mega-councils and undermine local representation. Grammy-nominated rapper Slow Tie has been cleared of raping 2 women following a house party in 2021. The 29-year-old, whose real name is Tyrone Frampton, and his co-accused, Alex Blake Walker, were both acquitted today of 3 joint charges at Oxford Crown Court. Blake Walker was also cleared of an additional charge of sexual assault. The jury returned those verdicts after more than 10 hours of deliberation following a 2-week trial, where the defendants denied the allegations, claiming the sexual activity was consensual. And close to 1,000 people are feared dead after Cyclone Chido tore through Mayotte in the Indian Ocean, making it the strongest storm to hit the region in over 90 years. Winds of up to 125 miles an hour ripped apart homes, leaving entire neighbourhoods now in ruins, and caused severe damage to Mayotte's main hospital and airport. 1,600 emergency personnel and supplies have been rushed to the territory, which is home to 300,000 people. UNICEF is now warning of more widespread destruction to come and an urgent need for aid. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 1. Now, the government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky.
Yes, so the deal includes some guarantees, including to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies up until next year.
Well, Royal Mail, which was split from the Post Office and privatised a decade ago now, has seen its performance deteriorate in recent years, leading to heavy financial losses.
Yes, so the question is, was this the right move? Should Labour have allowed this Czech billionaire to buy up Royal Mail?
Well, delighted to be joined by the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, Dave Ward. Dave, thanks for joining us. I mean, I know that you were opposed to the privatisation of this service in the first place, but given that we know how people are sending fewer letters, buying fewer stamps, would it be right to have the taxpayer on the hook for a business that hasn't been doing so well? Isn't it better that this Czech guy, stumps up the cash?
To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think that's an accurate kind of assessment of the circumstances that Royal Mail is facing and that our members are facing. So let me position this as it really is. Royal Mail is a company that faces huge challenges. You've just explained some of those challenges. We're well aware of that. Our members are well aware of that. And the first thing is that although we've got concerns and have always had concerns about this takeover, and our members will have and people in the country will have, the absolute reality is that the current status quo with a Royal Mail board who have systematically run the company into the ground, of failed customers and failed workers and have no money, the status quo is the biggest threat to the future of the Royal Mail. That leaves us with a number of options. Now, this is a privatised company, and the company was always subject, as any private company is, to a takeover bid. And what's happened here is that the government have obviously reached an agreement that puts in place lots of protections for workers and for the country to ensure that UK postal services are going to be run in a way that still adds social and economic value to the UK. We've added to that, because our responsibility is to deal with the situation in front of us. We've added to that with an agreement that actually gives extensive job security commitments beyond what you said there. That was incorrect, your assessment of the no compulsory redundancy guarantee. But it goes way beyond that in so many different areas. And our genuine view is that faced with no good choices, really, for the future because of the circumstances that Royal Mail faces, this is the best option at this point in time in the interest of our members and the public and UK postal services.
So reluctantly, you are actually quite happy with this deal because of these specific guarantees. But there's a lot of people in the country who are worried about this because they see Royal Mail as part of our heritage, been around since Henry VIII. It's never been under foreign ownership, and they see it as yet another piece of our history just being sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah, look, we're concerned about that. These are not circumstances we would want. Ultimately, we'd want the government to renationalise Royal Mail. And actually, this is the first time since privatisation where a UK government has agreed to take a golden share in the company. And there is an ongoing involvement of the government under the terms of the agreement that they've reached, and also under the terms of the agreement that we've reached. And what I would say to you is that we get those concerns, but the plain truth of the matter is the current board, all British directors, are running this company into the ground. They got no money to invest, they claim. They gave away 700 million to shareholders and then told the workforce they had no money. These people got no vision for the future. So the choices in front of us are to deal with, how do we rebuild Royal Mail? And the commitments that we've got, I would say to the public and to anyone who's got any concerns, when you see the full detail of the agreement, you will see that we have made a lot of progress here in terms of giving us a chance to rebuild Royal Mail. And all of those concerns about the heritage of Royal Mail are taken care of in the terms of the agreement that Mr. Kretinsky has signed up to. He's got to now earn the trust of the workforce, and he's got to earn the trust of the country. And we're not going to be in a better position to force that that situation than the agreement the government's reached, but more importantly, the agreement that we've reached.
Now, of course, we have mentioned the concerns, the challenges that this business faces, the fact that it's facing a population that do send fewer letters, that there are many different competitors now in the market that send parcels for less money or more efficiently. Do you fear that some of the protections that you've negotiated for in this deal, some of those protections that have been won for your members, do you not worry that if there are no redundancies for a period of time, that if there are so many guarantees on what people can be paid, that actually that might put Royal Mail at a disadvantage in this hyper-competitive market of delivery?
No, not in that situation, because what we believe the agreement does is give us an opportunity to grow Royal Mail. The current board do not see the fact that Royal Mail have an infrastructure second to none in the UK. They've got no vision for the future. What we've agreed with Mr. Kretinsky is that we will agree a new growth and business plan within the next 6 months that will invest in the workforce, invest in the infrastructure of the company. And that gives us our best chance to see if we can overcome some of these challenges.
I just wonder if the union in the past had maybe been a little bit more flexible, not demanded, no redundancies over the years, and maybe been, I don't know, not always wanted to keep every single job as it is, because with private companies, they have to adapt in order not to die. And perhaps, Royal Mail was too stuck in the past with some of the working practices and all of that, and that was to the detriment in the longer term.
No, absolutely not. I mean, our union for the last 10, 12 years has been saying that we've got to create a diversification of services and products. What we don't want Royal Mail to become is just another parcel courier. And the people that have been running Royal Mail, why we've had those disputes in the last 10 years, and there's been a lot of them, I would accept that, is because all they've wanted to do is exactly what you just said. They want to let Royal Mail wither on the vine, and their interest was only in becoming like another parcel courier, not with our members, by the way, not with the workers on the current terms and conditions, but with self-employed workers. That's the market we're operating in. And for us to achieve continuously, to stop them doing that, first of all, and then to now give us a chance to rebuild the company where there will be some investment, I think is quite remarkable if you look at the overall circumstances. The most important people here, there's two groups. One is the customers of Royal Mail, and their needs are changing. We accept that. And the other, of course, is the workforce. And if Royal Mail wants to grow, the conditions it has to meet is to get the workforce back on board. The most trusted workforce in the UK, one of them certainly. That gives us an opportunity. And this deal puts in the foundation to look at things quite a lot differently and put postal workers and customers back at the heart of Royal Mail.
Well, I think a lot of people want to see that brand around for a long time more. So good luck to you. Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communications Workers Union. Thank you very much indeed. I'm a little bit torn on this, because on the one hand, I don't particularly want huge amounts of taxpayers' money, if we were to go back to a nationalisation of this company, huge amounts going into a potentially failing business. But at the same point, is there a risk now to Royal Mail and its brand? OK, there's guarantees for the next 5 years, but what about after that?
Yeah,
is that just the death of another British heritage trademark?
But I suppose this is the crucial point. If there are all of these impositions on how Royal Mail can deliver, having to deliver at the same price letters all around the country to the furthest reaches of the kingdom, that, of course, is not an imposition that
so you
other
mean
companies have.
You have to pay the same for a first-class stamp to go down the end of your road as you do to the Outer Hebrides?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, that's obviously equitable, but that puts Royal Mail at a disadvantage compared to other delivery systems.
OK, well, this is a remarkable story. A convicted terrorist is reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn because he was deeply offended by its sign. OK, a convicted terrorist was offended.
Goodness me. Well, it's reported that 60-year-old Khalid Bakr claims that depiction of a bearded Arab incites violence. Yes, the convicted terrorist is concerned about the incitement of violence.
Yes, despite him previously being jailed for preparing jihadi propaganda. He also claims it's racist. And here we go. He wants more than £1,800 from the landlord of the historic inn in Amersham and plans to take on 30 more with the same name if successful. So he's not stopping at one. He wants to take 30 pubs.
But publican Robbie Hayes has called it a complete joke, adding that the pub has been called the Saracen's Head for 500 years. Well, delighted to say that we now have Robbie Hayes on the line. Thanks so much for joining us there outside your marvellous pub. I mean, you came home one day and found a letter demanding £2,000 from you. What was your reaction?
At first, just shock, really. I thought it might have been some kind of scam, but because it was from HM Courts and Tribunals, I quickly realised it wasn't. And then upon reading into the story and his claim that he actually came here, which I dispute, there was then several lines of different, what he called offences for the actual signage.
Have you ever had any issues with your signage? Has anyone ever come into your pub and said, that's a racist sign, take it down?
Never, nothing like that, no.
I mean, as you've been saying, this has been the name of this pub for 500 years, and yet now, suddenly,
yes,
a convicted terrorist is coming after you for it. What are his grounds?
He reading into the writ, he said he was scared for his life actually walking past the sign. That it incited violence towards a certain race.
I mean, that's quite incredible, isn't it, Robbie? I do wonder if perhaps having a convicted terrorist after your pub and writing to you like this, demanding money, saying that the sign of your pub is racist, might in fact be slightly scary for you.
Well, to be honest, it was someone else flagged it to me. When I looked into it legally, whether he actually had a case, and I was quite rightly informed he probably doesn't, I was asked to take a moment to Google him, and it was at that point I realised, yeah, like you rightly said, he is a convicted terrorist.
No, I mean, it's just an incredible and stunning...
yeah.
No, sorry. I think there's a bit of a delay on the line there, Robbie. But clearly, this is deeply concerning for many people. Not just for you, your financial stability, but also your safety, but the culture and the heritage of the country.
Of course. Yeah, it is part of our heritage. There's several Saracen's Heads up and down the country, and where's he going to stop with this? Upon probing him further about the actual offensive nature of the sign, he whittled it down to the fact that the word head was the part that offended him. So, is he going to? What are we going to do with pubs called the King's Head, the Queen's Head? I mean, where will this ever stop? It's quite incredible, really. I don't know. I think I'm his guinea pig case, because he's also said if he wins this, he's going to go for every other pub with a similar name.
Well, yes, I think that might be exactly the case, and it may well be that he's looking for money, payouts as a result of this. But you're going to fight this. You're going to fight this, Robbie.
I am. I've already rejected it. He has a certain amount of time to counter-reject it again. And I've even got to the point on the HM website where I had to select what court I'd be happy to go to if it actually did go to court. So that could actually happen further down the line.
That is extraordinary that an individual who has been so associated with violence in his past spent 4 years in prison for actually inciting material or these terror offences about the material he was producing. I would imagine he wasn't printing pub signs himself. I would imagine that his bar, or at least the bar in our courts, should be really rather higher. But we have seen bizarre court rulings before. Is there a part of you that thinks, goodness me, this could get very hairy indeed?
In today's day and age, 100%. I wouldn't be surprised if it did go further.
And
I'd also question the fact that he's actually ever been to this pub. He said he came in here on the 27th of October. CCTV footage and my staff suggest otherwise. I deny he's ever been in this town. I think he's done it all from at home on the internet. which may be a case of perjury, right?
Well, we'll have to see, but what's your message to the other landlords of the Saracen's Head around the country? So there's about 30, there's dozens of pubs named the Saracen's Head. What's your message?
Be vigilant, do as I did, reject the claim, and perhaps we should all form a group and get together and fight it together. Strengthening numbers.
That is an interesting suggestion. Of course, if indeed there has been perjury going on here, if indeed this individual has sat at his home on his computer, written to a dozen pubs, pretending that he went to them just for a quick buck, it would seem. I mean, have you looked into what could actually happen in terms of countersuing? Or actually maybe getting some money out of this guy for the nuisance that he's calling?
I'll be honest, when I logged onto the portal with the code number supplied on the actual letter, the three options were to admit I'd done something wrong, reject his claim, or to counter-reject and sue him back. And I'll be honest, I pressed that one at first, and the complexity of it made me go back a page and just reject it to begin with. So, you know, he hasn't done it in 5 minutes. He sat down and thought about this, if he actually done it himself.
Well, it's
not an easy process. It's quite long-winded.
Well, this is the thing. Sometimes when people make these claims, the process of refuting the claim and going through all the court processes and everything is so stressful that people really feel like they're on the back foot. So good on you for, you know, fighting this. And also, maybe that is the best way to go. Get all the pubs involved with the same name so that you can sort of, you know, fight back together. Robbie, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. Really appreciate it, and good luck to you. Thank you very much. That's the landlord of the Saracen's Inn. The Saracen's Head Inn. The Saracen's Head Inn. There we go. There we go.
Yes, I mean, it is fascinating that we're now supposed to mean the Saracen's Head is somehow violent because you're chopping off someone's head. I mean, does that mean, as you rightly say, the Queen's head is somehow anti-monarchist? I doubt it.
I mean, he said, while walking through the area, I was shocked and deeply offended by what I saw. I saw pub signage depicting a brown-skinned, bearded Arab Turk male with a turban and captured the Saracen's Head. This instilled worry and fear in me, since it was clearly xenophobic, racist and inciting violence to certain people. I immediately complained to the pub and requested it be removed. And this is someone who was convicted of disseminating terrorist documents.
Can't keep track. I thought they wanted more diverse faces in our media. But anyway, a hearing over the anonymity of an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Yes, the alleged spy, currently known only as H6, has been described as having an unusual degree of trust with Prince Andrew and is also reported to have met with former Prime Ministers Lord David Cameron and also Baroness Theresa May.
Well, joining us now is the former Conservative MP, Bob Seeley. Bob, of course, you're an expert in all things international relations. How concerned should we be about this Chinese spying operation?
Well, we should be pretty concerned because it's not a one-off. The United Front, which was the sort of propaganda front of the Chinese Communist Party, it sort of inhabits a grey area between espionage and, you know, overt operations. And what it is agents of influence, people peddling influence, trying to steer influential people to liking China, to not questioning where the COVID virus came from, perhaps, for, you know, sidelining people who want to be more skeptical about China, who are warning about the dangers of China. So this is not a one-off. There are a lot of people like this in our society, whether it's people spying on Chinese students or whether it's people trying to get close to former prime ministers. It's part of a major operation, and it is part of a form of conflict, grey area conflict, where China wants to defeat the West using non-military measures, and I wish we'd wisen up.
And Bob, I mean, you say that Prince Andrew has acted, well, being a bit of a useful idiot in this scenario. How so?
Well, look, anyone who allows these people to get alongside them, and you know, you can be just naive and unlucky, but you should be careful. If you are an influential businessman or politician or royal, you probably need to be slightly wary about who your friends are, and you need to be wary about who you take advice from, who you're close to. So this is not just about Prince Andrew, and there are enough people putting the boot in, and I don't particularly want to add to that. It's much more a systemic approach by China seeking to influence and manipulate opinion amongst our elites. And I think we have to be wiser to it. We do not have a coherent policy towards China. We very badly need one in order to mitigate and minimize the damage that it could do to us and our relationships with the US, with Europe, etc. The West has to stay united, and it's not at the moment.
Of course, it was only a couple of weeks ago that it was all smiles and handshakes between Keir Starmer and Xi Jinping at the G20 conference down in Brazil. And now we're hearing that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will be making an extraordinary visit to Beijing over economic matters in the coming weeks. Do you think that this government has a blind spot here? Because we've also learnt today that Number 10 is not confirming or denying if the Prime Minister met with this spy.
I think this government is a blind spot. And look, clearly, as a former Conservative MP, I'm not going to be particularly supportive of it. But I think even I'm surprised by how truly awful it's been on so many fronts, as I'm sure you guys are and many of your listeners and viewers. On China, they don't seem to be interested in any form of consistency. And despite having talked about morality and ethics and human rights when they were in opposition, as soon as they are in power, the only thing they seem to be talking about is trade. And right now, so much of that trade is actually just happening as a one-way street, and it's Chinese exports coming into this country and not imports going the other way. So just looking at trade alone is not good enough in itself, and we need to talk about all the risks and opportunities that China presents, but especially the risks. And right now, we're avoiding that because I think I think this government has a blind spot on China, but it has a blind spot on Chagos Islands, it has a blind spot on the EU, it has a blind spot on Trump, and it clearly has a blind spot on the British economy, as we found out, sadly, with the budget.
OK, well, Bob Seeley, thank you very much indeed. For one Conservative MP, great to speak to you. Got a punchy piece in the mail, I must say, on this issue. Yeah.
Of course, what the government might say is, it's a tough world. We know we were going into this clear and open-eyed, but, I mean, ultimately, we can't be having more trade wars. It's economically beneficial to keep buying our cheap plastic goods from China. I suppose there is a sort of terrible choice that any government must face, which is, do you want lots of cheap goods and therefore low prices, or do you take some big moral stand on moral issues?
It'd be nice if we didn't have useful idiots cozying up to these guys. Anyway, lots more coming up on today's show. In the next few minutes, Angela Rayner is going to promise to make devolution the default setting for councils across the country. Is this the right move? There's also controversy over potentially local elections being delayed. Is that democracy denied?
Well, that's to come after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, 32 minutes past 1 exactly. Downing Street is refusing to comment on whether the Prime Minister or any other ministers met with an alleged Chinese spy. The Prime Minister's official spokesman also refused to confirm if Sir Keir Starmer would support attempts to name the spy in the Commons, stressing that ministers engage with China in line with UK interests. Meanwhile, Mr Starmer has voiced concern over China's actions following claims the spy formed close ties with senior political figures and Prince Andrew. Well, pressure is now mounting in Parliament, with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith calling for answers and Nigel Farage threatening to name the suspect under parliamentary privilege. A hearing over the anonymity of the alleged Chinese spy is set to take place at the Royal Courts of Justice in around half an hour's time. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed from the Church of England until fresh complaints emerged. Mr Cottrell said it was impossible to act sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement follows an investigation, and he stressed that Tudor was never protected. Cottrell is set to take on additional duties in January when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down. A redesign of local governments is sparking fears that powers will be taken away from local communities. The government's devolution plan, the biggest shake-up since the 1970s, is proposing merging councils into larger strategic authorities to cut costs and streamline services. Labour has defended the move, claiming it could save up to £2 billion, which would be invested in frontline services. But critics, including the District Council's network, are warning the proposals could create mega councils and undermine local representation. A 12-year-old girl has been charged with manslaughter over the death of an 8-year-old grandfather in September. Our reporter Will Hollis has been outside Leicester Magistrates Court for us today.
Grandfather Bim Coley was attacked in Braunston Park, Leicester, last September and died in hospital the next day. Well, today a second person has been charged in connection with his death. A 12-year-old girl appeared at Leicester Youth Court this morning, charged with manslaughter. After a short hearing, the schoolgirl, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was released on bail ahead of her next court appearance at Leicester Crown Court in February. A 14-year-old boy has already been charged with Mr. Coley's murder and is due to enter a plea later this week ahead of a provisional trial date next February.
Will Hollis there for us in Leicester. Well, in other news, Nigel Farage has condemned the suspended sentence given to the woman who threw a milkshake at him during the general election campaign, calling today's ruling an example of two-tier justice. OnlyFans model Victoria Thomas Bowen was sentenced to 13 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months, after pleading guilty to assault. The attack occurred outside a pub in Clacton in June as Farage campaigned for MP. This afternoon, the Reform UK leader took to social media saying, "We now live in a country where you can assault a member of Parliament and not go to prison." Those are the latest headlines. Tom and Emily back up with you very shortly. First, though, we'll take a quick look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's how the markets are shaping up at just after 1:30. The pound will buy you $1.2655 and €1.2055 euros. The price of gold, £2,104.39 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently standing at 8,271 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Hello, here's your Met Office weather forecast for GB News. For most of us, through the rest of today, it's actually looking largely dry, and there will even be a bit of sunshine around. But across northern Scotland, it's a much wetter story. That's because there is a front lingering here, and it is going to bring some persistent and at times heavy rain, which is why we're going to see some rainfall totals building up. There could be a bit of disruption, particularly on the roads, even a little bit of flooding in some places. A slightly drier, brighter story across the Northern Isles, but a few showers pushing their way in here. And like I said, across much of the country, it is looking mostly dry with some sunshine pushing through at times. Temperatures are a little bit above average for the time of year, most places getting into double figures, but there will be some strong winds across northern parts, making it feel colder than this. As we go through into this evening, it is staying wet across many parts of northern Scotland. Could be some travel disruption, so do take care if you're heading onto the roads. Otherwise, across other parts of Scotland, some showery bursts, a few showery bursts across parts of Northern Ireland too, but generally a drier story to end the day across much of the rest of the country, and there will be some clear skies around as well. As we go overnight, we are going to stick with that drier theme for many places. A few outbreaks of rain here and there, but it's mainly across northern Scotland where it's looking pretty wet. Otherwise, there will be some clear skies around. I'm not expecting much fog to develop because of the winds picking up a little bit, but there could be some low cloud pushing in across some higher ground across the north, so some hill fog is possible in some parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount because of those winds picking up, so not an especially chilly start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, though, turning cloudier with cloud pushing in from the west, and it is going to turn a bit wetter, a bit windier. The rain initially across northern and western parts, it's not really going to reach to the southeast until later on in the day. Temperatures, well, they look similar to today really, still a little bit above average for the time of year, but like I say, those winds picking up. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Southbound on the M5, 3 lanes are closed and there's queue in traffic to a broken down lorry from junction 5 through to Worcester at 6, adding 30 minutes to your journey. Long delays for the northbound side of the M1 as it is closed to a vehicle fire from Daventry at 16 to Rugby at 18, delays to Northampton at 15A. Southbound on the M1, it is also very slow to an earlier accident from junction 22 for Colville to Leicester at 21. All lanes have reopened, but it's still very slow following the earlier closures. Clockwise on the M25, a lane closure to an earlier broken down van before the Wisley interchange traffic is coping well, though it's also on the move for the southbound side of the M5, though there is a lane closure on the exit slip road at 20 due to a broken down vehicle. And that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
A turning point for devolution. Merry Christmas, Britain. Well, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, will announce plans to redesign local government, merging councils together, all in a bid to speed up the delivery of new housing and infrastructure. But could there be a double edge to this sword? Might our elections, as a result, be delayed?
Yes, it's not looking good. But joining us now is the Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute, Max Marlowe. Max, do people want their local councils to have more powers? Do people want their mayor to have more power?
I think they do, to be honest, Emily. I mean, let's see what situation we have at the moment. We've got a ginormous amount of councils who have gone bust. Local services are not being delivered efficiently. And there is a massive, massive burden with things such as social care. So reform is needed. However, do I think they need a change in powers? Not quite. I think they need a change in how they can raise money and what they're obligated to spend. So let's remember, councils are able to look over planning, and I think that needs serious reform, as Angela Rayner
Max, you've
knows.
just said that they're not doing a very good job, and then you say that people would want them to have more power. Also, last time I looked, local elections, there's not a great turnout either. Are people actually really wanting them to have more power? I mean, where's the evidence?
I think they're just more upset. I think they're just upset with this situation we've got, right? I mean, they're obligated to spend a ginormous amount of money on social care, for example. That was taken off the books, essentially, from Whitehall and put into the lap of local governments. We can see that they can't raise any more money, even though they really do need to, because they're stuck with, business rates and also, areas, around property. So I just think those sorts of areas need serious, serious reform, and we need to allow these councils to have a bit more power to actually do what the people want them to do, which is provide really good services. We know central government's not going to do that. We know local government needs to do that, but they're in this bind.
Well, Max, as we can see on our screens, Angela Rayner is preparing to speak, and when she does start speaking, we will, of course, have to rudely interrupt you.
Yes, she's there on the seat.
She is indeed. But, Max, you mentioned fiscal devolution here. You talked about tax-raising powers for governments, for local government. This would be concerning to many people who look at the people introducing these powers and think, goodness me, aren't these all people who would rather a society that had many more taxes?
In some ways, yes, but I think in many ways local government is sort of in such a terrible, terrible state because of the situation we've had for the past 30 years, 40 years, 50 years even. It's going to be a ginormous shake-up that it just attracts the wrong people. And I really do hope that with new powers and with really good reform, and let's remember, this is the first proper reform we've seen of public service, not looking at transport or the NHS so far. I mean, let's remember that. Proper reform, structural reform, to actually make this system better. And I hope we can have that.
Yeah, Matt, when I look at policies like this that are quite big changes to the way we do things, I think what's in it for the current government? What's in this for the Labour Party? Is this just an ideological pursuit? Or is this something that perhaps, currently most of the mayors, 99% of the mayors are Labour. Could this be a way of clinging on to power?
You could look at it in that political lens, that's certainly true. I think the really big thing here is for Angela Rayner wanting to get more stuff built. We know that they're really struggling to get plans pushed through local council. And I think this is the really big barbed wire wrapped stick to get them to move on infrastructure and getting those 1.5 million homes built. What I also think it will happen is if there are not enough reforms made for those local councils to actually push forward reforms, Angela Rayner will just go ahead with it anyway, call in and sign off. And that's going to upset those councils more. So let's see what happens with these reforms that we're about to see. But I think it really, the overriding thing here is YIMBYism, which I think may delight Tom.
Right, and Max, the argument here that has been made time and time again seems to be that local councils, or rather sort of district councils, that are so close to the action, and you have councillors elected, basically if sort of one street opposed to one development really is opposed, they'll get someone almost in a single issue sense on that council to block that construction. Is the idea then that sort of you elect politicians who are slightly more removed from their local communities, but could that not in itself be a bad thing with that lack of understanding of local concerns and instead people further and further away, despite this all being called devolution?
Well, we could basically see we can either have super duper local democracy, and essentially if we run with that argument, we want people to be more involved. Let's just give all of these powers to parish councils. They are in the parishes, they are in the communities. Or we could, move it a little bit further up and get, a little bit more whack with our councils and essentially allow a more national plan, a more regional plan even, to push forward. Because as we know very well and clear, we've got a ginormous housing crisis, a completely broken planning system. And a lot of that is driven by councils who are listening too much to small little groups concerned about development. And not enough about the overall story of economic growth, of prosperity, of productivity, and the stuff we actually need to do as a country to become prosperous again.
I don't know if we want our local councils to be able to decide absolutely everything for us. There's a story out today about how Labour are dropping plans to require councils to actually consult residents before changing street names for woke reasons, really. Remember what happened in Haringey? They had to change Black Boy Lane, even though all of the residents on the street didn't want to. I mean, do you really want to be giving more power to some of these activist councillors? I don't know. Anyway, Max Marlowe, we will leave it there for now. Thank you very much indeed for putting forward the case for some more devolution.
Absolutely. And if Angela Rayner does intend to stand up at any point this afternoon and actually say what she's going to do, we will make sure we bring you the relevant details. Also, Israel will close its Dublin embassy as they accuse Ireland of crossing every red line. More on that next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Dora Carrington is not known to lots of people, and very few pieces are in public collections. So you have had a great deal of work to do to put this exhibition together.
Absolutely. It's been, next year, it will be 30 years since the last major exhibition of Carrington's work, which happened in 1995 at the Barbican Gallery. And I guess if people know Carrington's work, they might have seen the film that took place that year, that came out that year, starring Emma Thompson as Carrington and Jonathan Pryce as Lytton Strachey, who was her main kind of key relationship in her life. And that, in a way, dramatised a lot of those relationships. And so people will often know her life as much as her art. There's only 16 works in public collections. And so apart from chances such as the big billboard campaign you mentioned 10 years ago, there have been very few chances to actually see her work in the flesh. And so what this exhibition does is bring together around 80 works by Carrington and a few of her key contemporaries, providing a new generation really a chance to see and enjoy her work. She was one of the most remarkable of her generation at the Slade School of Art. She won several prizes for her drawing and her draftsmanship. And in the first room of the exhibition, we have some of the work, for example, a couple of female nudes that she painted when she was at the Slade, and they really are kind of quite outstanding.
One of the things that's been said is that in her landscapes, she's sometimes painting the human body as well as the landscape. Is that something that occurred to you? Can you stand up that?
Yes, I mean, one of her most famous paintings we have of Spain has. It's very much like you could liken it to the female form. You know, the kind of the
delicately put.
Yes.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 2. And Israel is to close its Dublin embassy as the Jewish state accuses Ireland of crossing every red line.
Yes, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar announced the closure in a statement due to extreme anti-Israel policies of the Irish government, he says.
Well, joining us now is the Irish writer and political commentator John McGurk. And John, for people that haven't kept across the issue here, what is Israel's issue with Ireland?
Well, first of all, hi, Tom. Hi, Emily. I guess there is a proximate cause and there's a more long-term cause. The proximate cause, the thing that seems to have provoked this, is that last week the Irish government announced that it would join the South African case at the International Criminal Court of Justice against the Israelis. But it made a very interesting announcement when it was doing that. It said that it would specifically instruct Irish lawyers to argue before the ICJ that the definition of genocide should be changed, or that the interpretation of genocide should be changed to encompass what Israel has been doing. So you can see how, from an Israeli point of view, that was essentially the Irish lawyers saying in public, look, we don't think what Israel has been doing in Gaza actually meets the current legal definition of genocide. Therefore, we're going to ask the court to broaden that definition in order that the Israelis might be found guilty. Now, I know from talking to some people in diplomatic circles in Dublin that was regarded as incredibly dishonourable and outrageous conduct, that essentially you're admitting, we don't think they're legally committing a genocide, but we're going to ask the court to redefine the word so that they might be found guilty of it. So that was the proximate cause. Now, obviously, there's been, ever since October the 7th, really, there has been immense Israeli anger about what's been happening in Dublin. We were one of the only countries in Europe who did not fly an Israeli flag on October the 7th. Very small, basic thing. Within days of that happening, we were a country that was urging the Israelis to act in a restrained manner and so on and so forth. Our politicians, our leaders have been consistently at the forefront of anti-Israeli activities internationally. We've taken it to the European Union, for example, with the Spanish to try and get the EU to suspend the Israel-EU trade agreement. We've been backing various motions at the United Nations and generally behaving in a very overtly pro-Palestinian way. We recognise.
We're going to. I'm terribly sorry to cut in. Hopefully we'll come back to you, but we've got to take Angela Rayner because she's talking about these new planning developments. Angela, there we go.
For change. I was delighted to stand alongside Keir as he announced our plan just over a week ago. It's a plan for putting more money in people's pockets, a plan for putting politics back in the service of working people, a plan for stability, investment and reform, not chaos, austerity and decline. And it's a plan that will deliver a decade of national renewal. Our devolution agenda is central to this and to the first of our 5 missions to kickstart economic growth. We've already taken important steps towards this. We've taken tough decisions in the budget to stabilise the economy, preventing a return to austerity, while protecting working people's pay slips and freeing up tens of billions of pounds of investment in Britain's future. We have established a national wealth fund and just last week announced reforms to our planning rules to get Britain's building and the 1.5 million homes that we need. And as we publish the English Devolution White Paper today, we are taking another step towards relighting the fire in our great regions. And our aim is to create an economy and a society that works for everyone, and by tapping into the incredible talent that exists in all parts of our country. And where better to be marking this milestone than here in Leeds, at the fantastic Nexus Innovation Hub, which brilliantly bridges the gap between business and academia. The backdrop here would have once been towering mills and chimneys, and now places like Leeds are proudly forging a future as bright as their industrial past. And in doing so, they're not just powering growth and better jobs in the communities, but as Gordon Brown argued so powerfully in this very place 2 years ago, they're also restoring faith in our democracy by once and for all putting the right powers in the right places. And Leeds is not alone on this journey. Just look at what our amazing mayors have been up to here today and what they have already achieved. A multi-billion-pound 10-year growth plan in West Yorkshire with Tracy. She didn't mention that when she mentioned all the other mayors. Oxford Street regeneration in London with Sadiq. Publicly owned battery trains in Liverpool with Steve. Buses under local control in Greater Manchester with Andy. Lots more with Andy. I know, he's my mayor. I'm biased. Opportunities for unemployed young people in the West Midlands with Richard. New clean energy jobs in the East Midlands with Claire. North Yorkshire on a path to be England's first carbon-negative region with David. The investment zone in Tees Valley, turbocharging the digital creative sectors with Ben. Families supported out of poverty in the North East with Kim. And nature recovering in the west of England with Dan. And a health-led employment programmes in South Yorkshire with Oliver. These achievements are proof that we must go further than ever. And through our devolution reforms today, we will back our mayors to deliver even more. And it's about time. For all the promises about levelling up, after 14 years of chaos and decline, our regions are more divided than ever. That's what happens when you spend a decade pitting communities against each other. Now the foundations of a good life are crumbling, and it's no wonder. Our country is the most centralised in Europe, with too many decisions affecting too many people made by too few. And in micromanaging by central government and short-term sticky plaster politics, and you've got a doom loop of real problems going unaddressed in Britain's regions. And there's huge potential that's unrealised. The last Labour government paved the way for the London Mayor, the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Senate, and the Northern Ireland Assembly, with the great John Prescott laying the groundwork for the devolution model we know today. But under the Conservatives, devolution has often meant that creating a patchwork of individual deals benefiting some parts of the country, while other parts have missed out. Well, no more. With our plan for change, we're turning the page on an economy that hoards potential and a politics that hoards power. It's time for a completely new way of governing, one that unites public and private sectors at all levels of government, business and unions and the whole of civil society in a shared purpose. And we're serious about this. Within days of the election, one of the first things the Prime Minister and I did was welcome the England mayors to Downing Street. We can't bring about the change and the national renewal that we were elected to deliver without them. That's why I'm wasting no time in handing more powers and the skills for those people with skin in the game to drive real sustained change for every region. Devolution will no longer be agreed by the whim of a minister in Whitehall. It will now be default in our constitution. We're moving away from an ad hoc system and towards a simpler and more ambitious framework for devolution. We will make it clear which powers go with which type of authority. We will bring new efficiency and accountability to local and regional government. And we will truly empower the local champions who understand their area, its identity, its strengths, and how to harness them. It sounds simple, but it's never been done. But ultimately, our aim is mayoral devolution over areas of genuine strategic scale, and to create strategic authorities as a new tier of local government to give our cities and regions a bigger voice. And now I understand that devolution is a journey, and some will need time to decide the course they wish to follow, and we will give local leaders time and space to do this. But our ambition is clear. We want to fill the map with devolution. Our manifesto pledged to give everyone access to devolved power. So I will legislate for a new power of ministerial directive which will allow central government to knock heads together and create strategic authorities when local leaders cannot agree. And as well as broadening devolution across England, we're also deepening it. Today I'm announcing unprecedented new powers for mayors, equipping them with stronger levers to drive growth in their communities. Mayors will be hardwired into the fabric of how we govern and will lead the way on house building, transport skills and more. Too often, mayors' hands are tied by Whitehall, even when it comes to allocating their own budgets. So we will create a clear and transparent route for all mayoral combined authorities to receive an integrated settlement. This means moving resources between projects that matches what their people need. We will give mayors new powers over strategic planning and new call-in powers so that they can build the homes we need and plan for growth on a larger scale. And we will get mayors working more closely with Homes England to unlock new homes. The most mature areas will be able to set the strategic direction of any future affordable homes programme. We will devolve future funding to support regeneration and housing delivery. And we will consolidate adult skills funding, introducing joint ownership of the local skills improvement plan and new routes to influence 16 to 19 provision. And we will devolve funding to support economically inactive people into work. And funding for retrofit will be included in the integrated settlements by the end of the Parliament. We will also create a statutory role for mayors in governing the rail network, with a right to request on rail devolution. Now, this all means easier commutes across more joined-up transport links, new homes properly connected to local infrastructure and skills provision that matches local job opportunities.
Well, here we have it, the largest local government reorganisation since the 1970s, learning that mayors other than the London mayor will get what's known as call-in powers, so that your mayor can decide whether anything gets built or indeed not built in your local area, overruling those councils.
So I guess it's a good thing if you trust your mayor to make the right decisions
and
on
if you
infrastructure.
hate your mayor, you'll loathe this.
You'll loathe this, yes. So this is all about whether you want local councils and your local mayor, whoever that is, to have more powers away from Whitehall, away from the government centrally, away from ministers even, and actually more closer to home. But I guess it's a question of whether this adds to bureaucracy. That's my fear.
But, of course, what Angela Rayner was also talking about is the bizarre patchwork of different local authorities that we have in different areas. Some areas have combined authorities, some areas have metro mayors, some areas have combined authorities without metro mayors, then you've got district councils, county councils, unitary authorities, and it's completely different in lots of different parts of the country. I think there is a strong argument to there being some sort of uniformity where everyone, no matter where you live, you've got the same tiers of government with the same powers.
Yes, I mean, that would be simpler and easier to comprehend, and everyone would know what happens regardless of where you live in the country. Yes, I worry perhaps more power in smaller hands. I don't know. It depends what you make of local government, doesn't it?
It really does. But this could be very, very significant. Of course, Angela Rayner has not yet confirmed whether these new super-duper councils will actually be elected in May or the following May, denying perhaps millions of people the chance to vote for their local councillors for a year.
Does this fix the problem, though, of councils going bankrupt? No.
Well, they'll be able to...
They don't have more tax-raising powers, do they?
They do.
They're still going to go to the coffers of the Treasury, aren't they?
Angela Rayner has announced the mayoral levy...
That's not the same.
...for developers. So this is interesting, because currently Sadiq Khan has this mayoral levy, but other councils don't. Meaning if they're facing financial difficulty, what they could do is just approve a lot of development and apply the levy to that development.
OK, rather than council tax, maybe?
Yeah.
We shall see. Right, we're going to have to get to the bulletins, but we'll be back in a tick.
Very good afternoon to you. Fast approaching 4 minutes past 2. At the top story, well, Downing Street is refusing to comment this lunchtime on whether the Prime Minister or other ministers met with an alleged Chinese spy. The Prime Minister's official spokesman also refused to confirm if Sir Keir Starmer would support attempts to name the spy in the Commons, stressing that ministers engage with China in line with UK interests. Meanwhile, Mr Starmer has voiced concern over China's actions following claims the spy formed close ties with senior figures, including Prince Andrew. Pressure is now mounting in Parliament, with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith calling for answers and Reform's Nigel Farage threatening to name the suspect under parliamentary privilege. A hearing over the anonymity of the alleged Chinese spy is now taking place at the Royal Courts of Justice. Well, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat spoke to us here on GB News earlier, and he thinks the government are moving too fast to re-establish relations with China.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life that means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised today for not acting sooner in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no Church of England cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed until fresh complaints emerged. Mr Cottrell said it was impossible to act sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement follows an investigation, and he also stressed that Tudor was never protected. Mr Cottrell is set to take on additional duties in January when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down. Well, let's take you back live now to West Yorkshire, where Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is unveiling her plans for a major redesign of local government. She has, in just the last few minutes, been speaking about those devolution plans, the biggest shake-up since the 1970s, and could see councils merged into larger strategic authorities to cut costs and streamline services. Critics, though, including the District Councils network, are warning that the proposals could create what our very own Tom Harwood has called super-duper councils and take power away from local communities. However, Labour's defending the move, claiming it could save £2 billion, which would be invested in frontline services. In other news, a 12-year-old girl has been charged with manslaughter today over the death of an 8-year-old grandfather in September. Our reporter Will Hollis is outside Leicester Magistrates Court for us.
Grandfather Bim Coley was attacked in Braunston Park, Leicester, last September and died in hospital the next day. Well, today a second person has been charged in connection with his death. A 12-year-old girl appeared at Leicester Youth Court this morning, charged with manslaughter. After a short hearing, the schoolgirl, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was released on bail ahead of her next court appearance at Leicester Crown Court in February. A 14-year-old boy has already been charged with Mr Coley's murder and is due to enter a plea later this week ahead of a provisional trial date next February.
And just before I hand you back to Tom and Emily, Nigel Farage has condemned the suspended sentence given to the woman who threw a milkshake at him during the general election campaign, calling it an example of two-tier justice. OnlyFans model Victoria Thomas Bowen was sentenced to 13 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months, after pleading guilty to assault. Well, the attack occurred outside a pub in Clacton in June as Farage campaigned for MP. The Reform UK leader has taken to social media saying, "We now live in a country where you can assault a member of parliament and not go to prison." That's the latest from me for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, over to Tom and Emily.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. And controversy continues to sweep through the Church of England as the Archbishop of York is battling against a sex abuse scandal.
Yes, so this investigation has revealed that during his time as Bishop of Chelmsford, Stephen Cottrell allowed priest David Tudor to remain in ministry, despite knowing he was barred from being alone with children and had paid compensation to evict him.
Well, this follows a damning report into church abuse and cover-ups in the Church of England that all led to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby.
OK, well, joining us now is the Vicar of Christ Church, New Malden, Stephen Kurt. Stephen, thank you very much for speaking to us about this this quite sensitive matter. What are your thoughts hearing about the Duke of York and these allegations?
About the Archbishop of York.
Sorry,
the Duke of York on this occasion.
They're both in hot water. There's something about York, isn't there, at the moment? My goodness me.
I'm terribly sorry, Stephen. The Archbishop of York.
Sorry, I just wanted to check I got the story right. No, first of all, it's deeply, deeply tragic yet again to hear about people suffering at the hands of the church, the very people who should be there to love them and safeguard them and care for them. And I'm afraid every single detail that I've heard about this, and the Archbishop of York, obviously then he was Bishop of Chelmsford, his handling of it or non-handling of it is just so familiar. It's the same old excuses, the same old story. And frankly, and I say this as a serving vicar in the Church of England and someone who loves the Church of England, the culture is problematic in almost every single way. And safeguarding is simply the most serious outcome of a culture where they try and do as little as possible for as long as possible with anything difficult and hope that it goes away. And when Stephen Cottrell says that he was given advice that nothing could be done, well, that's what's always said. And there's always more that can be done. They need to be tenacious and absolutely determined that any element of risk is removed.
Of course, in his resignation statement, the Archbishop of Canterbury spoke about the changes within the Church of England that have been carried out in recent years. Do you think that those changes, have worked, will actually fundamentally change what you describe as this sort of awful culture that produces case after case after case of this?
No, frankly, I don't. And unfortunately, it makes it even worse, because if you see safeguarding as about protocols and processes and procedures, that's at most 2% of safeguarding. Safeguarding is about people being absolutely determined and committed to make sure that people don't suffer at the hands of the very organisation that should be protecting them. So it was Peter Drucker, the management consultant in America, I think, said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that applies with bells on to safeguarding in the Church of England. And frankly, the bishops mostly have not got the personalities or the energy or the commitment to drive through the change that's necessary. The Bishop of Newcastle, it's very significant that she's a lone voice at the moment. She has slipped through somehow. They've made someone a bishop who has got courage and integrity to speak out.
Of course,
silence, deafening.
Of course, she was the first and I believe only bishop to have spoken out in favour of the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Why do you think it is that she sort of is that lone voice and everyone else is so quiet?
Well, in her case, it's because she's got the courage of her convictions and she's determined to do what's right. In the case of the others, it's not so much as people are sometimes suggesting it's because they want to be the next Archbishop. It's not really that. It's that they want to retain a cosy, comfortable life. The church can be an incredibly cosy position if you want it to be. If you keep your head down and you don't make waves, you can get steady promotion. You can be made an honorary canon like David Tudor was. There are these various bits of status and gongs around that if you keep your head down and you don't rock the boat, will come your way. And you can have really quite a cosy, nice existence. And it's vital that clergy are courageous. We only exist to serve people and with a particular priority on those who are vulnerable. That's our number one priority, to go into bat for the vulnerable. And it simply won't do to have these bishops saying there's nothing they could do.
Absolutely, and these stories must be devastating for people who are so close to the Church of England, people like yourselves. As you said, you love the Church of England as an institution, but these failures continue. Stephen Kirk, thank you very much indeed. Vicar of Christchurch, New Malden, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you.
We're going to turn to some breaking news now, because an alleged Chinese spy banned from the UK and linked to the Duke of York, as well as 2 previous Prime Ministers, can now be named as Yang Tenbo. That has been the ruling of a High Court judge this afternoon.
Yes, so there you go. The alleged Chinese spy has been named as Yang Tenbo, will no longer be referred to as simply H6. Yang Tenbo. We'll bring you more information as we get it.
We'll also bring you pictures of Yang Tenbo and ask the question, have you bumped into him? Well, we'll be getting much more on that, of course, after the break. But in the meantime, farmers have organised a major event in London this afternoon, all as part of the farmers' next step in their attempts to reverse the so-called family farm tax.
Yes, this time the event is hosted by the London Palladium, which is owned by Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, who's been very outspoken on this issue, and he joined last month's mass demonstration. There we go.
Absolutely. It seems that farmers are certainly not backing down. Let's join Adam Cherry now at the London Palladium. Adam.
Yeah, afternoon, guys. We've been hearing several speeches throughout the last couple of hours, particularly from Victoria Vivian, who is the president of the Country Land and Business Association. Really punchy language from her, actually, accusing the Chancellor of hiding, saying the government needs to show some humility over these changes and reverse course, and saying they affect more than just the wealthiest farms, they affect lots of businesses. So we've been hearing from her. And also Tim Farron, who is the environment spokesman for the Liberal Democrats. We had a chance to chat to him within the last hour or so. This is what he told us at GB News. Take a listen.
Really awful for everybody else who enjoys eating. The reality is that we only produce just over half the food we eat in this country already, and if we do what we're going to do here and take more and more farmland out of active food production, then that makes that problem even worse. And so I know the government thinks that by its inheritance tax change, it's going to clobber rich people. It's not. It will, at the same time, push lots and lots of family farms into a position where they've either got to sell off part or all of the farm, and that means fewer people caring for our environment, fewer people looking after us and providing for our food.
Now, later this afternoon, we're hoping to hear from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. In fact, within the next sort of 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be speaking to her. So hopefully, we'll bring that to you when we see it. Thank you very much, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Adam Cherry, for being there at the London Palladium. We'll bring you some of the highlights from Kemi Badenoch's speech. We'll see what she says.
Absolutely, but that's not, of course, the only gathering taking place today. Up in Darlington, 150 tractors are rallying in a peaceful showcase, highlighting the impact on the budget on family farms. Anna Riley is there. Take it away.
Good afternoon to you both. Yes, we can see there's been a massive turnout. As you said, up to 150 tractors have arrived here at Darlington Farmers Auction Mart. Many with different signs. We can see one there saying "My family feeds yours." A lot of them with Christmas decorations on as well. We can see the Grinch there. Lots of tinsel, stars. And if we just look over here as well, we can see that speeches have actually begun. So lots of different farmers, the NFU, all organising speeches here to people that have turned out, and a real mixture as well. Families have come, younger people, older people, people who are part of the rural community as well, not just farmers who have turned out in solidarity. And of course this is all in reaction to the budget, in reaction to new rules around inheritance tax, and farmers saying how that's going to impact them. Potentially they're going to have to close down the farms as they cannot afford to pay the inheritance tax. I'm joined now by Jess Stewart. Thank you for coming on, Jess. Just tell us a little bit about your family farm. They're not too far away in Bishop Auckland.
No, thank you for having me. So I'm about 15 minutes away from here, Darlington Mart, near Bishop Auckland, and we do a bit of all sorts. So we have a mixed farm, you would call it. So we do arable, and I have my own flock of sheep. Me and my sister did have our own herd of Belter Galloways, which are currently in the freezer as a way of life. My parents have a contracting business, and then I myself have, I suppose, diversified out of the farm, and I'm a solicitor. But it's a whole farming family business, really, that comes together.
And you've been a farming family since the 1980s. What has this new rules since the budget going to mean to your family?
So whilst I might not have been around as a lot of the people here today, it's still going to have a massive impact. If my parents died tomorrow, we would have a serious financial burden. We would have to sell some land, and with that means the land is sold to probably people who want to avoid the tax. None of us as farmers want to avoid paying tax, and we want to have this asset to use to produce food for the nation. It's not something we have in the banks. It's, as farmers, we are asset rich, cash poor, so it's something that would have to be sold, and the people it would fall into the wrong hands is the most prediction. It would fall into people who do want to find reasons to avoid paying tax, and so we would have a serious detriment, and me and my sister would have to find that money, and we wouldn't be able to afford to continue as we are.
And you're a voice for younger farmers for the NFU. What are younger farmers feeling at the moment?
I think it's already such a struggle in place for new entrants. Through being an NFU Student Young Farmer Ambassador this year, I've met people from throughout the country who are trying to get into farming, and it's such a hard place to get into, and this is only going to set people back further. The need and want for younger people to be farmers, you can just see today there's people from 2-year-olds to 90-year-olds, and everything in between. They really want to do it. It's an occupation, it's a lifestyle, and people love the rural community and farming. It's such a way of life that people want to continue doing, and I see that as well with young farmers. People continue to come, continue to live, breathe, work, everything to do with farming, and it's just something that's going to set everyone back, and it's just going to be an extra burden that a lot of people can't bear, whether they're getting it from generations and passed down, or as new entrants. It's just going to be a barrier that a lot of people can't manage.
Thank you for sharing with us, Jess. And it's concerns that Jess have got and other farmers here that they're putting in the public eye. This convoy of 150 tractors is going to set off very soon throughout Darlington, getting that message across from farmers heading into Christmas that they still want these rules changed and that they are still fighting for the rural community and for their businesses.
Younger generation, because they're the ones who are going to have to cough up the money.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to have to find something to sell. Yeah. Anna Riley there, reporting from Darlington.
Well, let's return now to that breaking news. An alleged Chinese spy banned from the UK and linked to the Duke of York can now be named as Yang Tenbo. That's coming from a High Court judgment this afternoon.
Yes, Guy Vassell-Adams KC, he told the High Court that there's been an enormous amount of media reporting in relation to this story, particularly in relation to the relationship between my client H6 and Prince Andrew, as well as a huge amount of speculation about the identity of my client. And there we go. We find out that he is in fact named as Yang Tenbo, a 50-year-old director of a Chinese investment consultancy.
He also went by the name Chris Yang when dealing with many people in the highest echelons of British polite society. And it does seem that this is a case that has been ongoing for some time. He was first stopped by counter-terror police back in 2021, had his devices seized, but it wasn't until last week that there was a determination that this man should be excluded from the UK.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So the High Court has decided, well, the judge has decided to lift this anonymity order, no longer H6, but now we know the true name, Yang Tenbo.
Now, we're also going to be bringing you some pictures of Yang Tenbo in just a little moment, because this is a man who has rubbed shoulders with some of the most senior individuals in the country. 2 former prime ministers, the brother of the king, and so many more besides. We're going to bring you as much information as we can after this very short break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high. If you just turn it down by 1 simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things. But, it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Merry Christmas, Britain. And we're going to return to that breaking news that the alleged Chinese spy banned from the UK and linked to the Duke of York can now be named as Yang Tengbo. A High Court judge has ruled.
So let's get more now with Luke de Pulford, the co-founder of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Luke, how concerned should we be that this man, Yang Tengbo, also goes by the name Chris Yang, rubbed shoulders with the highest of high society?
We should be extremely concerned, and not just about him. We should be concerned about China's programme of overseas influence activities through the United Front Work Department, of which this guy was a part. It's estimated that there could be up to as many as 40,000 people working on behalf of the Chinese state abroad, and we are not even close to working out how to deal with it. This guy is just the tip of the iceberg.
I'd like to think that people like Prince Andrew and also former prime ministers and people in the highest echelons of our civil service would be able to sniff out a spy. But that seems not to be the case.
Well, no, because most of the things that he was doing are not on the face of it illegal. He was exchanging money for a bit of influence in a way that many people do. The thing that differentiates him from many others was that he was doing it in order to further the interests of a foreign state. Now, we've only recently got close to being able to deal with this. Last year, we passed a piece of legislation called the National Security Act, and it has within that something called the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, with 2 tiers. You're supposed to put countries you trust in the political tier and ones you don't in the enhanced tier. We've been having this ludicrous debate over whether or not China should be in that enhanced tier for more than a year now. The previous security minister said that all the work was ready to get it done, and now we're still in this situation where we find out that people have penetrated senior government, even the royal family, and our agencies, our intelligence agencies and our police are not able to do anything about it because they simply lack the legislation. That has to be dealt with. We've got to move into a better place in all this.
I suppose there is an argument that the United Kingdom, of course, operates a spy network. Famously, we should just say this is one of the earliest pictures we've been able to show you here. Yang Tenbo, Chris Yang. This is what he looked like. This is how he went around in his suit, schmoozing and boozing the British establishment. But Luke, there will be those that say, hang on, don't the Brits have spies in other countries too? Isn't this just the way that the world works?
There will be people who say that, but there will be people who don't know what they're talking about and don't understand what the United Front Work Department actually is. This is a massive overseas influence program that no other country can get close to touching. It exists partly to control overseas Chinese diaspora, which it does through terrible threats and through trying to persuade them to go home and all kinds of control mechanisms. But it also does it by trying to make the host state more receptive to the aims of the Chinese Communist Party through influence. Now, last year, our Intelligence and Security Committee, in a report on China, said that China had penetrated every sector of the UK economy, and the principal vehicle for that is the United Front Work Department. We shouldn't confuse this with the routine snooping that countries do upon one another. United Front Work Department is in a completely different category.
We should say that the alleged spy has hit back, saying his lawyer has been saying that there's been an enormous amount of media. He said he's absolutely not a spy. It's entirely untrue, done nothing wrong or unlawful. Is this what usually happens in these types of situations, that there is just an outright denial?
Yes, there is always a denial by people who are associated with the United Front Work Department. You could see a really fun version of this, or instance of this, where somebody stole secrets from Coca-Cola. They stole $120 million worth of secrets from Coca-Cola. They were found out by the FBI, and that person, in an interview which is now published, denied it at every single stage. And they revealed that they knew that this person was lying again and again and again. They lied until they couldn't lie anymore. So it's not surprising at all that we have a blanket denial. That's exactly what I would expect.
Now, of course, this is all in the context of a thawing of relationships between China and the United Kingdom. A warm smile and a handshake at the G20 between Keir Starmer and Xi Jinping. A meeting, an invitation for Xi Jinping to visit London, or indeed Keir Starmer to go to Beijing. And in the meantime, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, rushing off to Beijing in the coming weeks too. How will this revelation today affect any of that?
Well, I think that the government at the moment has sadly got off absolutely on the wrong foot when it comes to relations with China. Some progress had been made in previous administrations, and this is not, by the way, a party political point. Across all parties, people are very concerned about China. But I think at the moment the government seems to be labouring under the misapprehension that unless we tether our economy to the Chinese economy, we won't be prosperous as a nation. And they want to try to make us as prosperous as possible, very understandably. That's not going to be achieved by cozying up to China. In fact, what's going to happen is we're going to disadvantage ourselves in the longer term. We're going to find ourselves more exposed to Chinese influence because of dependency. And if, God forbid, there is escalation around Taiwan, we'll be in a much, much weaker position. So very unfortunately, it looks as if the government is pushing for a reset with China, which is like golden era redux, unfortunately. We don't want to see that because it's not where our allies are. And it's certainly not where the Chinese Communist Party is, which is ever more assertive abroad and ever more repressive at home. This is not an ordinary partner. Beijing is a threat to us, and we need to be able to recognise that.
Well, Luke, there is going to be an urgent question at about 3:30 in the House of Commons on this. I don't know if that's being led by Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, but of course he is a very vocal voice on this. But thank you very much for now. Luke de Pulford, co-founder of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. That is a concern if suddenly we're going to have a bit of a closer relationship with all this hostility. But this is Good Afternoon, Merry Christmas Britain on GB News.
Yes, and there's plenty more to come on today's programme. Sir Keir Starmer was branded the worst Prime Minister in modern history after just 5 months in the role. Why is that? Well, we'll come to that after your latest headlines with Sam.
Very good afternoon to you. It is 33 minutes past 2. We'll start then with a recap of that news breaking in just the last few minutes that the alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew has been named this afternoon as Yang Tengbo. The High Court lifted a ban on his name, describing him as a close contact of the Duke after rejecting his bid for anonymity. The 50-year-old, who was banned from Britain on national security grounds, reportedly ran a lobbying firm with ties to Beijing, Westminster and royal circles. Yang reportedly attended the Duke's birthday party in 2020 and helped organise a UK-China business summit. Pressure to reveal his identity had been mounting after Reform UK's Nigel Farage vowed to name him in Parliament. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no Church of England cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed until fresh complaints emerged. Cottrell said it was impossible to act sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement follows an investigation and he stressed that Tudor was never protected. Cottrell is set to take on additional duties when Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby steps down in January. In other news, a 12-year-old girl has been charged with manslaughter today over the death of an 8-year-old grandfather in September. Our reporter Will Hollis has been outside Leicester Magistrates Court following the case.
Grandfather Bim Coley was attacked in Braunston Park, Leicester last September and died in hospital the next day. Well, today a second person has been charged in connection with his death. A 12-year-old girl appeared at Leicester Youth Court this morning, charged with manslaughter. After a short hearing, the schoolgirl, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was released on bail ahead of her next court appearance at Leicester Crown Court in February. A 14-year-old boy has already been charged with Mr. Coley's murder and is due to enter a plea later this week ahead of a provisional trial date next February.
And Bashar al-Assad has made his first reported statement since the city of Damascus fell just 8 days ago. He has said he never considered fleeing the city after rebels took over and stormed the capital. Shared on the Syrian presidency's telegram, Assad claims he went to a Russian base to oversee combat, only to find Syrian troops had deserted and the base under drone attack. He says Russian forces airlifted him to Moscow, but denies any plans to step down, calling his role meaningless if the state falls to terrorism. Rebel groups led by Tahrir al-Sham are now forming a transitional government, though their jihadist past is raising doubts about promises of tolerance in the country. Those are the latest headlines for now. Sophia Wensler will have your full roundup at the top of the hour, and Tom and Emily will be back after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, here's your Met Office weather forecast for GB News. For most of us, through the rest of today, it's actually looking largely dry, and there will even be a bit of sunshine around. But across northern Scotland, it's a much wetter story. That's because there is a front lingering here, and it is going to bring some persistent and at times heavy rain, which is why we're going to see some rainfall totals building up. There could be a bit of disruption, particularly on the roads, even a little bit of flooding in some places. A slightly drier, brighter story across the Northern Isles, but a few showers pushing their way in here. And like I said, across much of the country, it is looking mostly dry with some sunshine pushing through at times. Temperatures are a little bit above average for the time of year, most places getting into double figures, but there will be some strong winds across northern parts, making it feel colder than this. As we go through into this evening, it is staying wet across many parts of northern Scotland. Could be some travel disruption, so do take care if you're heading onto the roads. Otherwise, across other parts of Scotland, some showery bursts, a few showery bursts across parts of Northern Ireland too, but generally a drier story to end the day across much of the rest of the country, and there will be some clear skies around as well. As we go overnight, we are going to stick with that drier theme for many places. A few outbreaks of rain here and there, but it's mainly across northern Scotland where it's looking pretty wet. Otherwise, there will be some clear skies around. I'm not expecting much fog to develop because of the winds picking up a little bit, but there could be some low cloud pushing in across some higher ground across the north, so some hill fog is possible in some parts. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount because of those winds picking up, so not an especially chilly start to the day tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow itself, though, turning cloudier with cloud pushing in from the west, and it is going to turn a bit wetter, a bit windier. The rain initially across northern and western parts. It's not really going to reach to the southeast until later on in the day. Temperatures, well, they look similar to today, really. Still a little bit above average for the time of year, but like I say, those winds picking up. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. If you're heading towards the Gateshead flyover this lunchtime, where it's still closed for safety checks, as is the road underneath the flyover. A38 Tyburn Road, the southbound side in Gravelly Hill. Now the exit slip road to the M6 southbound's closed off. An overturned vehicle there at M6 Junction 6, Spaghetti Junction. Southbound M5, 3 lanes out, 5 to 6 towards Worcester. Travel time of half an hour, just one lane open. There's a broken down lorry. The northbound M1 still closed, 16 up to 18. Daventry to Rugby, the queues back to Toaster 15A. Long queues there for a lorry fire. And the anti-clock M25 is still closed, I'm afraid. Brentwood at 28 to the M11 at 27. Long queues back to Romford 29. There's debris from a bump there. A queue 3 miles clockwise as well, back through junction 27.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon and Merry Christmas, Britain. It is 39 minutes past 2. Now, nationwide drone sightings continue to send the United States into a frenzy, with the public demanding answers to this question. What on earth are the mysterious objects in the sky?
Fair enough question. The drones first appeared last month, and some lawmakers have suggested they could be part of an Iranian or a Chinese or even a Russian spy programme. Others have gone further, linking them to a sinister government plot. So what's the truth?
Well, the president-elect, Donald Trump, has demanded answers about these drones, even suggesting shooting them down. Let's get to the truth, or at least somewhere near it. We're joined by host of That UFO podcast, Andy McGrillen. Andy, just how bonkers has America gone over all of these drones?
Yeah, good afternoon. This story that began in the UK back in mid-November that the UK press never really picked up on, with drones being spotted for several weeks, and it's only just now started calming down. Around about November 20th, over 4 RAF bases used by the US, 2 of those rumoured to have nuclear assets. We had deployed British troops, and it was all very quiet, and it's since kind of bled over to the United States, where again, after a couple of weeks, we've got high-ranking politicians and US lawmakers, the incoming president-elect, demanding answers. And so far, we've got a lot of questions and not many answers.
Andy, if you had to take a guess, if you were a betting man, what would you say these drones are? Where are they coming from?
So I believe, just from everything that's being seen and with a sensible hat on, I think these are US technologies being deployed by aspects of the military or an aspect of the government for some kind of out in the public testing. It only happens at night. We don't really see much during the day. And for the reason, I've got no idea at the minute. As much as this looks like the start of a real-life Independence Day, I don't think that's the case.
No, that is a very, very rational position. Some of our audience will, of course, be disappointed that it isn't the aliens. But of course, there are questions, because it didn't seem that in the UK this was necessarily testing domestically, because people were raising huge questions about why is this starting now in the days after the UK allowed Storm Shadow missiles to be fired into Russian territory in Ukraine. Could it be that the drone phenomenon in the United States is distinct from the drone phenomenon we saw around US bases in the UK?
Absolutely. But perhaps if it is some kind of testing, and it's all speculation, perhaps that was a beta test before the big public test. I think the UK public and media are far quieter yourselves obviously apart from that at the moment, in reporting and talking about UFOs, UAP, whatever they may be. I think it's such a big way this is happening, though. It's nightly, and we now have airports, runways being shut down as people are filming passenger jets from the windows with these objects underneath them at very close distances. That's incredibly dangerous, no matter who these are coming from. If this was a foreign adversary, this is an act of war all round, which leads me to believe that it's not because of the reaction.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Andy McGrillen. You are the host of that UFO podcast. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, we've got to turn to some news with regards to the reorganisation of local governments. Of course, there were meant to be elections on the 1st of May next year, but now many areas may not be having those elections due to this big organisation. It's led to some to suggest, is this a cynical ploy from the government to try and avoid having elections at a difficult time when it's down in the polls?
Yeah, well, Nigel Farage has come out swinging for the Reform Party. He says cancelling elections in some areas of the country where reform are gaining momentum is the act of a desperate government. They have the audacity to call us a threat to democracy whilst they act like third world dictators. I think he's referring there to Harriet Harman's comments about how reform are a threat to democracy.
And this is the problem. There may be legitimate reasons that they're doing this big reorganisation. It will be difficult to elect a council that then could be abolished 6 months later. I can understand that. But my goodness me, is that sign from Nigel Farage not going to be the last one we hear in the run-up to these elections? It's not a good look for a government that is down in the polls, that is, that's gone from being 20 points ahead only a few months ago, only just before the election, to now, in at least 2 polls that I've seen, going down to 3rd place. Could it be that the government just wants to avoid having this difficult cycle of elections in some areas?
I think it's fair enough to ask if there's a link between those two things, deep on popularity currently, and the delaying of elections. I think Christopher Hope put it quite well earlier. Is delaying democracy denying democracy? And that's a question that many people are asking this afternoon. So I imagine we'll be hearing more from trying to hear more from the government on that one, what exactly they're up to here.
Absolutely. It seems that there is the possibility of delayed elections.
And is it in reform areas? Is it in only the areas where reform are doing quite nicely?
Indeed. Well, plenty to discuss, and you can get involved. Of course, gbnews.com/your say is the way to join the conversation.
Yes,
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This is a topic very close to my heart. I have become fully convinced that social media, smartphones are one of the primary causes of mental health problems in children and many other serious problems beside. Lots of governments are starting to talk about this, but the Australians are well ahead in their use of legislation. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I've got 3 young children and I'm really concerned about... I mean, they're too young to be on social media, but I'm really concerned about what lies ahead for them. I'm not sure I support what Australia's doing, not because I don't think it's a good idea to ensure that age verification is right. I'm just not sure that the age 16 is appropriate. But that's progress. If we effectively, as I do, accept the point that we need some sort of control, then we can move to a proper debate about whether that's 16, 14, 13, whatever it may be. And, of course, there are age restrictions on things like Facebook. I think, from memory, it is 13.
Yes, but it's a tick box.
But it's a tick box, so all you can do is you can just knock. If you're 11 years old, you can just predate your date of birth by 2 years, and you can get on. I think what Australia's proposing is interesting because it will stop young people, maybe without their parents' knowledge, short-circuiting the system because they're going to be asking for proper age verification and ID. That's definitely something we should do in the UK because it's enforced in the existing law. Query, is 16 the right age, Miriam?
I completely agree with it. It's something I actually said should have been done before. And I think what is good about it is that for a long time, a lot of governments have been saying that the actual social media companies should take more responsibility, but they're not going to because it hurts their bottom line. The most voracious users are younger users. So they will pledge that, oh, I'll put the tick box in, but the kid is the one who's going to actually tick the box. So doing something like this is saying that, OK, we will put in legislation that damages your bottom line. And I think it will force the hand because they've said it's only 12 months and they will reevaluate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It is just coming up to 10 to 3. Now, a campaign group has accused the BBC of sending bullying letters to pensioners, threatening to call on Christmas Day, to come round on Christmas Day, knock on that door on Christmas Day if they have no TV licence.
Yeah, quite extraordinary. The notice, which threatens a £1,000 fine and legal costs, has some of the following lines included. Will you be in on December the 25th? Right, OK. And our officers visit an address every 10 seconds. Quite threatening, I would say.
But as 500,000 households cancelled their BBC licence fee in the past year, does this seem like thuggish behaviour from the enforcers at television licensing?
Well, we're joined by Director of Silver Voices, Dennis Reid. Dennis, is this thuggery from the BBC enforcers?
Well, yes, I stand by that remark, and we've long argued that there should be an investigation into the people from Capita who act as the dirty work enforcers of the BBC about their tactics, because this has been going on for years now. And they know very well that vulnerable people will be, by and large, receiving these letters. And they say it's a mistake that these letters went out. Well, you can see there, it says very clearly, will you be in on the 25th of December? And I think they must have printed thousands of these, because some of our members have already been in touch with me to say that they've received these letters. So it was clearly a tactic to try and terrorise people who may have their family around on Christmas Day, that they did not want somebody calling at their door, threatening them with prosecution. So it's an outrageously underhand tactic, this one.
And of course, the whole system is built on threats and falsehoods and impositions. Because, of course, if a television licensing inspector knocks on your door, you are under no obligation to let that individual in. You're under no obligation to show them round your own home. And yet so many people feel like that's the case because of this sort of officiousness of these letters and these inspectors.
Yeah, since the over 75s had their free licences withdrawn 4 years ago, there's probably about 250,000 people, all of whom are now in their 80s and 90s, who've not been able to pay their TV licence, and they've had a continual stream of threatening letters over the years. In fact, one of our members, he keeps account of them. He does throw them in the bin, but he keeps account of them, and he's now had 45 threatening letters in the last 4 years. So this is just a latest in the line of, a whole series of these threatening letters. But this is the most crass of all, to pick out Christmas Day. And as I say it's a mistake, but they must have printed thousands of these, and they deliberately put the 25th of December down on it. So I don't take that.
I don't understand how it could be a mistake. 25th of December is quite a well-known day in our calendar. But Dennis, could you not argue that if you are using the television, watching the BBC, that you should pay for it?
Well, yeah, if you can afford to pay for it, then that is certainly the case. But, a lot of older people are really struggling this winter, what with the winter fuel payment being withdrawn as well. So it's quite the wrong time, when people are struggling with food and energy costs, to be sending these letters out. If it was a mistake, I would like the BBC to write to every single person who's had this letter to apologise and to say very clearly that they will not send another letter of this sort for at least another 6 months, so that people at least can, relax a bit to know that they're not going to have a knock at the door during the middle of winter.
Of course, it is a very peculiar system, an antiquated system that we use in terms of television licensing. There's all of these sort of jokes about detector vans that don't detect anything and all the rest of it. But I wonder, is it now time to have a grown-up conversation about a system that almost requires this sort of threat and coercion rather than one that's more voluntary?
Indeed. I mean, it's a funny one, the detector vans one, because I don't think one's been spotted for many years. In fact, I think one of our members actually spotted one in a village in North Wales about 4 years ago and rushed home to get his camera, but unfortunately it had left by the time he got back. So, I can't actually prove that. But yes, the licence fee has had its time. Public broadcasting, if you want public broadcasting, it does have to be paid for, but it needs to be paid for in a different way from a flat tax. I mean, this is a flat tax, so if you're very poor, you pay the same amount as if you're a billionaire, and that's not right.
Yeah.
So it definitely needs reforming.
Well, Dennis Reed, thank you so much for putting that point across, Director of Silver Voices. We will say that a spokesperson for the authority has said, we apologise to anyone who received a letter. There will be no visits on Christmas Day. Well, then why send a letter like that?
Very peculiar stuff. Well, thank you so much for watching the first edition of Merry Christmas Britain. Yes, the festive rebrand of Good Afternoon Britain, lasting right up until the 25th of November.
How many sleeps till Christmas,
of December. I have no idea, but all I do know is that you won't get an inspector around your house